Hello, and welcome to the Being Human podcast. If you're new here, or if you're returning and you haven't yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss any future content coming from Being Human. And it's also the best way you can help support Being Human's growth. On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Joe Taylor. Joe Taylor is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He is the head grappling coach at HW1, and he is, of course, my coach. Joe is a massive asset to the gym. Anybody that's coached by Joe, anybody that trains at the gym will tell you what an integral part of the team Joe is. He's someone that never likes to take credit himself, never really gives himself the credit that he's owed, but he is someone who the gym would fall apart without. I've been training with Joe for over 4 years now, and Joe is not just a coach to me, he's like my big brother. He's given me so much advice, not just in terms of grappling, to help me on my journey in jiu-jitsu, in competing grappling. He's given me so much advice in life, how to better my life, how to deal with difficult situations that I've come across, that I've had to work through. Joe is someone who is incredibly intelligent, again, not just in terms of his knowledge with grappling and jiu-jitsu, but with life in general. He's got a lot of wisdom to share, and we went through his entire journey as a jiu-jitsu student and then jiu-jitsu coach, and all of the wisdom that he picked up on the way. I always learn something when I talk to Joe, and that was especially true of today. If you enjoyed the conversation, then make sure to hit that like button, comment, share, and hit that subscribe button as well. Thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting Being Human. Okay, so we've got to give the people what they want. So we'll get the important stuff out of the way first.
Right.
Official statement on your rap career. MC Fathead, take us through the origin story.
I can't believe Jimmy's got in your head like this and allowed this to be and you've allowed this.
It wasn't just Jimmy, the whole gym. The amount of people.
The fans do want it. Yeah.
They do want it.
It has over 3,000 views on YouTube as well. So
well, MC Fathead does.
MC Fathead, the music video. Yeah, not the. There's a couple of just audio tracks on there, but the actual music video with Perm Dog and G-Man, I believe, were my accomplices. That has over 3,000 views. And I recently messaged my mate about a year ago and asked him if he still had the password to the account so he could take it down. And he claims to have forgotten the password and has no access to the account anymore. So it's on there forever.
It's on there forever.
So let's see if we can hit 10k views. Maybe we will after this podcast.
Maybe we will after this. Yeah, I mean, if we could get 3k views on this, we're doing well.
So an official statement for what it was about.
Yeah, take us through it. How did MC Fathead come about? Give us the backdrop, the context.
There was a lot of recreational drug taking back in my late teens and early 20s. And me and my mates are just a bunch of idiots, to be totally honest. Mainly me, I was the catalyst in it all, and I sort of just...
You were the ringleader.
I puppeteered my easily influenced friends into making a ridiculous music video, yeah, which still haunts me to this day. There was a guy in Hinckley who was actually a serious, so just for the record, I've never really, seriously...
It is in jest.
Yeah, it is in jest. It's total trolling. I've never in any serious way, shape or form tried to pursue a musical career. But there was a lad in the Hinckley space who was doing at the time, and I believe his name was MC Rubik's, like the Rubik's Cube. And he'd brought out a serious music video where he'd filmed himself on top of KFC roof in town and stuff like that. So I claim to be the one true rap icon from Hinckley, and he was obviously stepping on my turf. He was a young man who probably had no idea who I was, and within the space of about a month I'd recorded and filmed a music video called Rubik's Ain't Ting, which I had several of my friends feature on, and I think that went more viral than anything he ever did, and it was a total piss take. So yeah, that's the...
So you won?
Yeah, well, I did meet him at one point as well. Okay. Like we crossed paths in town, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but he did actually see the funny side. He was a nice lad. Yeah.
See, if this happened today, there would have been a celebrity boxing match.
Yeah, exactly. So this was before all of that. Yeah, we just spat our bars and let the public decide. Yeah. Let the public decide. Like it was settled purely through music. There was none of this external theatre. Like we settled it on the mic.
Back when people were gentlemen.
Yeah, we settled it on the mic, mate. We settled it in the booth. Yeah.
I'm going to get rinsed for saying this by Jimmy, Brett, and everyone else in the gym. But I think, did you write it? Did you write
Yeah, I wrote it.
I think that's pretty good. Obviously, it's in jest and it's funny, but I think you're a pretty good lyricist.
Well, I do enjoy writing. And like, yeah, I obviously had some fun with it and stuff. I had one lad who was out of his mind on cocaine once in town tell me it had shades of Eminem. I do remember him saying that to me. How true or serious that is, I'll leave that to debate. But I remember some lad who was at the bar once come up to me and said, "Oh, you're MC Fathead, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is actually happening." Then, yeah, I am. Yeah. And he was just like, "Yeah, man, them lyrics were sick." I can't remember what he exactly said, but I swear down he compared me in his own mind to Eminem. Do I agree with that comparison? Absolutely not. But I suppose like the way I was comedically rapping compared to like Slim Shady's early career could have some kind of correlation. I don't know what he was thinking. The lad was heavily under the influence of narcotics. So yeah.
Well, I don't currently have that excuse in this present moment, but I'm happy to go on record to say that I thought it was well written. And
I can't remember any of the actual lyrics. To be honest, like to be honest, Aaron, I've repressed
because a live rendition has been requested.
Yeah, there's no chance that's happening. I've repressed the thought, the lyrics, the image, all of it out of my mind. To be totally honest, because what started out as being a funny joke is now literally made its way and crept its way into my career, my personal life. People who know and I would like to take me seriously are aware of MC Fathead, and at the time I never thought it would get this far, but it has, and it's to my detriment, if I'm totally honest.
So a resurgence isn't on the cards.
A resurgence is definitely. I did actually do about 5 or 6 years ago at my mate's barbecue, I believe. We did actually enter the booth one last time and record another freestyle, but that's lost in the archive somewhere. I don't know where that's disappeared off to. But
whoever, if they're watching this,
Ben Coe, Sam Harrison, Joe Vozza, I believe they were there at the time. Yeah, it's around. Someone's got it on a phone or a laptop somewhere. It's around. Hopefully it doesn't surface. Yeah.
So when that was filmed, did you say you were 18?
I was around about 19, 20, I'd say. Yeah, 19, 20. It was before I'd started jiu-jitsu or anything like that. I started jiu-jitsu when I was 20, just about to turn 21. Yeah, I'm 99% sure I hadn't started jiu-jitsu yet. I was just sort of like maybe thinking about it. I don't know. I'm not sure. It was. I was around 19, 20. Yeah, I started jiu-jitsu just before I was 21. So it might have been literally the same year, but it was before that was
a transitory point.
Yeah.
Had a rap career, then moved into the
the origin story to my jiu-jitsu career is my failed rap career. Yeah, let's say that. Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to take it from there. So 18, 19, 20 years old. Who's Joe Taylor at that point? Like you said, you hadn't started jiu-jitsu yet, but what were you doing with life?
I was
what were your ideas in terms of what you wanted to do with life, in terms of a job?
So I'd never really I grew up pretty normal life, going to school and that kind of thing, meeting friends. Gradually over time, like, you know what I mean, you start going out, partying, that sort of thing. I was never really like a bad lad or anything like that, but I hung around with a few kids who were a bit naughty and everything else, and yeah, like my life wasn't going down a bad route or anything like that, but it just wasn't really going anywhere. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have like a purpose, I wouldn't say, but I don't imagine many people do at that age. Like a lot of people are yet to discover themselves. People go traveling, don't they? People like complete apprenticeships and that sort of thing. But I'd never done an apprenticeship or anything like that. I'd gone to school, like compulsory education, and then I'd gone to sixth form after that, which was a total waste of time. I spent the majority of it like smoking weed and and bunking off. Like, I didn't attend a great deal of classes. Like, I think I passed English and failed sociology and psychology. I couldn't tell you much about what I did with those courses, or whatever you'd call them. And then from there, I went into repairing, like cages they have in supermarkets where they bring all like the stock from warehouses. I got a job when I finished sixth form repairing them. It lasted about a week before I quit. And then I got a job working for National Grid, which is now Cadent, in the office on agency. And it was a pretty cushy job. Not life-changing money or anything like that, but it was just a steady 9 till 5, pretty comfortable, pretty easy. Started doing that. And then I was friends with a lad, and I'm still friends with him to this day. He's one of my childhood friends, Mark Timms. And Mark had recently got into kickboxing at that time, or Muay Thai. He'd recently got into Muay Thai, and he'd gone to university in Birmingham. He was training at K-Star in Birmingham, and he'd lost a load of weight, and it was just having nothing but a positive effect on his life. And I kind of always looked up to Mark a little bit. He's like always been like kind of a bit of a role model to me, sort of thing. I seen like the positive influence it was having on him, and we obviously spent a lot of time together. And he was like, "Why don't you try and do a bit?" And I think he recommended combat and exercise to me in the Neaton at the time, but it was
so that was already.
It was the original combat and exercise, not where it is now. It used to be in a different location, not far from the Queen's Hall, the Crew. And it used to be just up the road from there. So he recommended me to go there, and I went to an MMA class first, which Kev, my jiu-jitsu coach, took, because he was coaching MMA as well at the time. And it was more grappling based, obviously, through Kev being predominantly a grappler. He focused the class mainly around grappling, or at least the class that I went to. And then from there, I thought, this jiu-jitsu seems all right, and you don't have to get punched in the face either. So I'll give that a go. Jumped in the gi, started doing a few classes in the gi, and before I knew it, I caught the bug, and I was there 3-4 times a week. Started off purely just training the gi to begin with, and then started doing a bit of no gi as well. And then after a year, it was a bit quicker than that actually. After about 6 months, Kev then moved into the new combat and exercise, the new premises where it is now, the big like warehouse facility. And I spent another 6 months with him there before something happened between him and the owner. And Kev and him went separate ways. Rich, the owner of Combat and Exercise, stayed where he is now, where my good friend Ryan Hodgetts took over as like head coach after a number of years. And Kev went around numerous different gyms before settling where he is now in Warwick, which is like 12, 13 years later. But wherever Kev sort of went after that, I sort of followed him. So he was training in Coventry for a bit, and then he was coaching for quite a while at Stevie B's in Birmingham. I think you went over Stevie B's with me before.
Never actually made it. No.
Well, that was the original.
I've only been one since he moved to Warwick.
That was the original Gracie Bar at Birmingham, where Braulio first taught Kevin. And then Braulio moved into like a top of the range facility in Birmingham City Centre. And I think Kev adopted the old Stevie B's, which was a place called Sprawl and Brawl. It was like an MMA facility when Kev first took it over, and then he turned it into, I think he named it Pariah at the time. And then he was continuing to teach MMA, and he ran like the MMA program alongside the jiu-jitsu program. So I'd go over to Birmingham a couple of times a week and Warwick a couple of times a week. So like I say, I was training 3-4 times a week. And yeah, it just sort of snowballed from there. And obviously, like I would never say I was like fat or anything like that, but I was out of shape. Like I wasn't like in any way fit or healthy. So I started training jiu-jitsu through like the encouragement and influence of Mark. And just started noticing positive change in my like mentality, my attitude towards a lot of things. Like it just gave me a solid focus. And also I had some, I'm not going to go into on the podcast, but I had some personal issues going on at the time with my family. My sister wasn't very well, and it gave me a good distraction away from that, something to focus on. And I felt like I wanted to be someone who my mum and dad didn't want to have to worry about when they had everything on their plate that they had with Hannah. Not that she's a burden or anything like that, but she was very poorly, so I didn't want them to have to worry about me. So I thought, right, you knuckle down, sort yourself out, and get a focus. And I started training jiu-jitsu with Kev, and here we are now, 13 years later. Obviously, we can get into the the meat and potatoes of all that along the way on this podcast. But that's how I started doing jiu-jitsu. And then when I like I say, got into it, I started going to the gym as well, a lot more, lifting weights. I got in good shape physically. I felt more confident, felt like the positive effects it was having in my life in general. I progressed in my career. I ended up moving away from Cadent, getting a job with Balfour Beatty, managing a small team. And that suited me quite nice because it was in Birmingham. I got given a company car, so I commute to Birmingham, work in Birmingham, and then travel to Stevie B's, where Kev was teaching afterwards. And that was around the time then when I started competing a lot as well. So I was competing I competed a few times at white belt, but my blue belt years, I was blue belt for like 2 or 3 years. I probably, throughout my blue belt years, competed between, 30 odd times probably. And then I did a couple at purple belt and injured my back and have never competed since. But yeah, blue belt is where I really took competition quite, well, I say seriously, it was only regional level. I never went abroad or anything like that, but I was trying to compete at least once or twice a month. So it was more a thing like when I first started competing at white belt, I remember the first comp I ever did, I had the worst adrenaline dump ever, and it sort of gave me a complex. Like I managed to win my first match, but then I had to have a second match, and I think I got murked like 24-0 because I was literally paralysed. Yeah, I was literally paralysed, and I remember thinking after that, I can't ever let that happen again. And I used to get so nervous for competition and stuff. You just do. I can't explain why. Like Kev never put any pressure on me or anything like that. I just, like I say, I was putting a lot of time into it, and it meant a lot to me. So I think I put the pressure on myself, and I just wanted to be able to at least try and replicate to some degree what I was doing in the gym. Like by no means was I the best guy in the gym. Kev's always had a solid team of guys, but I knew I had some in, and Kev always encouraged me to compete and like made me aware that I wasn't total shit. Do you know what I mean? So, and I obviously the way you perform in the gym with certain guys who you know are good, and you see them go and compete and get on the podium, I wanted to try and replicate that out in competition. As much as I'll be honest, I hated it at first. I used to dread it. I used to dread competing. But
I think everyone gets nerves to some degree, and I think everyone will go for even people that then are able to control those nerves very well at most of the time. Everyone will have matches or points, whether it's early on in their career or later on in their career, where they'll struggle with, I mean, obviously I'm still really kind of in the inception of my competitive career in no-gi. But yeah, if we go back 2 years ago, I let nerves affect me way more than I do now. I still feel the nerves, but I'm just able to channel them better.
It's repetition. I remember I spoke to Kev about it one time, and I was like, sort of like opened up to him a little bit, where I was like, I get so nervous. I almost I hate it. I dread doing it. Like how do I get over it? And I remember he said to me, he was like, it will never ever go away, Joe. All you'll learn to do is control it, and you'll get used to those feelings. And the only way you can do that is by just keep throwing yourself into the fire. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And I know for a fact Kev suffers with nerves. He won't mind me saying that. Like, he still competes to this day. Like, he's not far off 50 now, and he's still doing the odd sub-only match and stuff like that because he believes it's good for his soul. He believes it's good to feel those emotions and dare yourself to do. I remember he said that to me, so then I made it my focus. Right, I'm just going to compete. Win, lose or draw, whatever I feel like, I'm just going to make sure I compete every month. And I did that for about 18 months, 2 years, every month at least once, if not twice. And I remember towards the end of that run, I moved up a weight class as well because I was trying to cut to medium heavy, and I looked great, but I felt like shit. As soon as I moved up to heavyweight, I started to medal a fair bit more. Like, don't get me wrong, I've never been someone who's consistently winning gold medals. I won far more bronze and silvers than I ever did gold. I won a handful of gold medals, a couple. But I noticed when I moved up to heavyweight and took away that stress of watching what I was eating and everything else, combined with competing on a semi-regular basis, I got to the point where I was like actually looking forward to compete. The nerves were still there, but it was more of excitement than it was anxiety, and I managed to like show a little bit more of myself. I never think I got to the point where I entered like what my mate Mark calls God mode, where you literally just move in.
You're in the moment.
And you're in the moment, you know what I mean, without thinking. The training takes over. But I definitely had a few performances through that consistency and competing at my blue belt years where I felt like I could at least enjoy the occasion and the moment. And yeah, win a few medals that way, rather than everything just being a total like storm of negative emotion. Do you know what I mean? And trying to pull through it, I actually managed to enjoy a few competitions and actually pull off some of the stuff I was able to learn in the gym with Kevin, the guys.
Yeah. On that note, John Jones said something before his first title fight with Shogun that
about the butterflies.
About the butterflies. There's nothing wrong with having butterflies as long as you can get them in a flying formation.
Kev used to call it harnessing the adrenaline. He was like, you'll always have adrenaline, you'll always have anxiety, and those things, like, it's fight or flight, and it's a natural human instinct before conflict. You're either going to run away or you're going to face the music. He says as long as you can harness those emotions and those feelings, you can use it as fuel. But if you let them take over you, then that's when you get what happened to me in that first match, where I was essentially paralysed. Like, I've never felt anything like it. I couldn't move, really. Like, I remember I come off the mat, I thought that was it. I think I'd managed to win. I can't remember if I won by submission or points, but I won my first match, I remember, in my first ever comp. And then I got off the mat and my mate Ryan Hodgetts was like, yeah, you got to go again in 15 minutes. You got another one. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And yeah, I just went out. It's pathetic. It was a hideous performance. I managed to not get subbed, but it was double figure points. And I was just lay there in the fetal position, just desperately trying to survive.
Yeah. Well, like I said, even someone like Kev, who's competed at a very high level in jiu-jitsu, everybody gets those nerves. And I think as well, particularly us being based in an MMA gym, obviously, the danger of competing in MMA is far greater than jiu-jitsu. So I don't think anyone's going to say that the adrenaline and nerves you get for jiu-jitsu in general are going to be as high as MMA. But I don't think that should lead people to discount, the nerves and adrenaline you do get from competing jiu-jitsu. You think about people that, compete in any other sport, basketball, football, tennis, that aren't even really contact sports. People get nerves from them. It's from so many angles. And so you've got the pressure that you put on yourself. You want to do your coaches proud. You want to do your teammates proud. You don't want people to think you're dog shit, for lack of a better word. And then there is also the very realistic possibility in jiu-jitsu that you're going to get hurt, especially these days with heel hooks and stuff. You're only one move away from being not able to train, being not able to walk for 3, 6, 9 months.
I was never nervous about getting, like you say, like I was never really very good at sport growing up. Like, I'm not like a naturally talented person. I played football more for my dad. My dad never forced me, but I knew my dad was a good footballer, so I tried to follow in his footsteps, and I was shocking at football. Like, I wasn't good at football at all. But I used to get nervous before matches, like, just again, the pressure of performing. I did a bit of, like, growing up when I was a young kid, I did like a little bit of performing arts. Like I was in a couple of plays, stuff like that. Again, you get nervous.
You get nervous for that.
Get nervous for that. So I was always aware of, like, performing anxiety to some degree, but I don't think anyone, and that this is no criticism of my coaches or the people who used to train with, I don't think anyone prepared me for competition and how it's different from the gym. Like, I think it really was a shock to my system, like the intensity of having everyone watching and the referee. I don't know what I thought it'd be like, but I remember it caught me off guard, and that's where the adrenaline dump really took me over in that first, or took over me in that first match. I sort of forgot where I was going with that point, but that's.
So I think everyone's in the same boat. When you start training jiu-jitsu or MMA, people tend to get the bug very quickly. And it sounds like you got that, like you said. You started training and everything snowballed, and you mentioned how it started to affect your life positively in all other areas, and you felt it was going to help with life at home, get out of the house a bit, and also it was a medium to show your parents that they didn't need to worry about you. Do you think it had to be jiu-jitsu or something like that, or do you think it could have been something else? Basically, what I'm trying to ask is there something inherent about grappling, about jiu-jitsu, about combat sports that you think had those positive effects?
I always thought, like, I remember I started watching the UFC just before I started training, maybe a few years before. I used to watch it with a few of my mates who had never done any training, but they were into it. Oh, like, God, watch this. This is sick. Like, this was around about the days when like Anderson Silva was in his prime. Like he was like absolutely schooling Forrest Griffin. Like I remember that fight. That's
like God mode.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
the God. If you want to see a definition of God mode, like in live motion, then it's Anderson Silva versus Forrest Griffin in it. You could say the same with Anderson Silva versus Rich Franklin. Anderson Silva's definitely experienced God mode more than a few times. And I remember I'd always not always, but I'd always been fascinated with combat. Like as a boy, as a lad, I think it's embedded into us in some degree. Like
Definitely.
You're into like action and stuff like that. I always like. But I remember when I first started watching the UFC, I thought, yeah, that's cool. And something did stand out to me about the grappling aspect, because when you're growing up as well, you wrestle and you tussle with your mates and stuff like that. And I was always pretty good at play fighting, as much as I was never good at anything else, like in terms of sport or anything. Like I could like hold my own in like a play fight and a bit of a tussle. So like I thought, maybe if I actually learned some skills, like I could be all right at this. And then I obviously discovered jiu-jitsu, and I thought, this is what essentially this is like. This is like high level play fighting. Do you know what I mean?
It basically is.
Yeah. I always say you have a jiu-jitsu match. You don't have a jiu-jitsu fight.
Yeah.
Like as much as some people call them super fights and stuff, I always say it's a jiu-jitsu match. But yeah, I started training in like with the influence of Mark, as we discussed earlier. I started training. I think my first couple of classes were MMA classes, or at least my first class was. But it was always the grappling that stood out. And the more I did, I remember the first time I rolled as well. Like it took me a couple of months maybe, because I just did beginners classes, and then Kev was like, "Oh, when are you going to do the advanced?" So I stayed for the advanced. And I remember John Robinson, you know John, don't you?
Yeah.
He was my first proper roll, and
really?
I remember he armbarred me probably. It wouldn't surprise me if it was in double figures. Yeah, he just kept doing the same move. I don't remember anything else, just the armbar. Kept armbarring me. He'd just get around my legs. And he was like a solid blue belt at this time, Joshua. Get around that. And at that time, there was no other belts in the gym other than blue belt. Kev was a black belt, and then we had a small team of blue belts. And
it sounds like it was like a good team. So you had Ryan
Hodges.
John.
He was a white belt at the time, but he was like, Ryan started training when he was like 16. He looked like Bruce Lee even back then, like shredded up. I remember it like phenom even back then, 16-year-old lad tapping out men. Like I couldn't get over it when someone told me he was like 16, 17. I was like 21 at the time. But yeah, we had a solid team of blue belts, and then a few white belts coming up to their blue belt, and then obviously Kev, who's amazing as well. But the first time I rolled, I remember thinking like, yeah, I'm going to get fucked up, but I'll do all right. I remember thinking that, and then John Robinson just absolutely freight me, and like it was so humbling, but also like liberating in a way. Like, like this is like, because those blue belts at the time, as much as a blue belt now, like they're all over the place, aren't they? Like, but at the time, it was Kev, who was like God. Do you know what I mean? And then you had these blue belts, but even that seemed like an unattainable level at that time. They seemed so much better than everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Like you'd watch them roll, and they'd just be like killing anyone who wasn't a blue belt alongside them. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, as soon as I started rolling, that was when I was like, right, yeah, I want to get stuck into this and get better at this. And over time, the more hours you put in, obviously you start to catch up with people and get a little bit more success, and you're doing things technically and methodically, and you're actually thinking about what you're doing, like the problem solving aspect. And it's just cool, man. Like it just struck a chord with me, and I enjoyed it. And obviously all the other outside influences, like I've discussed, and the positive effect it was having on the rest of my life. It was just a perfect storm. And yeah, the ball got rolling, and yeah, eventually it led to where I am today. But there's a lot that went on in between, obviously. Yeah.
And you mentioned as well about Kev starting off in the Neaton, but then moving to Birmingham, eventually ending up in Warwick, and you always followed wherever Kev went. What was it about Kev that made you do that, as opposed to just finding somewhere? Because obviously gyms were, few and far between when you first started.
There wasn't as many around there. There was a few, but yeah, not.
But they would have cropped up.
Yeah.
So what made you keep going to Kev?
Just because he's sick, mate. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's not just good at jiu-jitsu, he's an amazing teacher. Like he's got a really, like, if you want to say God-given, or if it's trained or taught, whatever it is, he can translate technique to pretty much anyone. Like there are some people that are unteachable, yeah. Like, but the majority of people, Kev would be able to break through to and give them some kind of like satisfaction from being able to train jiu-jitsu. He'd be able to tailor some kind of game towards them, whether it's an older guy or a newer guy, whether they were like mad athletic or whether they weren't maybe the most naturally talented like myself. Like he would be able to like unlock like what jiu-jitsu worked for me. I remember very early on he was just like closed guard, armbar triangle, you need to get good at that. Armbar triangle from closed guard, De La Hiva as well. That's your game. Just stick at that. Try and do that. Keep getting past. Like, let me know what people are doing. We'll figure it out. But that's your game. Stick with that. And for the first 2 or 3 years of jiu-jitsu, that's pretty much all I did. But I got pretty good at that, and that's still what I do even to this day. Do you know what I mean? Now I'm a black belt. Been a black belt nearly 3 years now. It'll be 3 years next year, and I'd say a lot of what I do, other than the inclusion of half guard, like I play a lot more half guard now since my back injury, and that's down to Jimmy. Jimmy like give me that like string to my bow, and I've sort of developed that from the stuff he's shown me. But up until then, it was like closed guard, De La Hiva, spider guard maybe, but that was like my bread and butter, yeah. And Kev made me very aware of that early on, like that's what, with your body type, that's what you need to be looking to do. But then I've seen him do the same thing with people who look nothing like me or are nothing like me, and he's got them to be successful in competition, and not even just competition, successful in the gym, being able to come to the gym, pull off moves, you know what I mean, and get some kind of satisfaction, enjoyment out of the train, not just being like there is inevitably going to be some period where you're the nail, but everyone at some point, if you persist long enough, gets to have a go at being the hammer. Some people establish themselves as a hammer, but other people, it's like, you know what I mean? Like you get out what you put in. But Kev will always, like I think Kev will always be able to get some form of mileage out of people if they give him the time to learn jiu-jitsu from him. Yeah.
So he's not only incredibly knowledgeable and able to converse that knowledge well, he's able to give everyone that's in the gym good individual coaching to really help them specifically.
Yeah, he gives good individual coaching. He's funny and witty as well. That all plays a part. Yeah. He's got his own way. He's just sound to be around. And that sort of is infectious on the other students. Like the core group of people that used to train at that time, they become good friends. I still speak to them now. Like some of them don't even train anymore, but if I bumped into them, like they're still a big part of my journey. Like them guys I started training with at the beginning, like a lad called Martin. I think he has started back up again now. This lad called Martin, I can't remember his second name, it might be Rollins, but he was like a beast at the time. Blue belt, got his purple belt, and then suffered an injury, and he was a fireman, so he had to sort of take his profession pretty seriously. And if he was getting injured at jiu-jitsu was going to have to be the thing that was going to give, not his career kind of thing. But he was a great lad, and like guys like Adam Walker and Ben Rooney and people like that who I come up with, and obviously Ryan, who I still speak to this day. Me and Ryan have basically come up together, although it be separately. We've always remained pretty close. Like Ryan's a great guy, and yeah, they're all guys who've stemmed from Kev's influence. Yeah, they've all come from me, and even like the new wave guys now, like Aidan Hewin Shady, he started back at the old combat and exercise. He's an OG, I'd say. Obviously good friends with Shady, come up with him. But like guys like Brad Boyd and Will Fellows, like guys that are more your sort of era, like they begun training with Ryan, but then they've also trained at places like Renegade and cross-trained all over the place. But they've found a home with Kev as well. Like I know Brad especially goes over to Nexus quite a bit with Will and Shady, and they all speak very highly of Kev as well. Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple of times your back injury. Talk us through that, when it happened in the context of your jiu-jitsu journey, the impact it had, how long it took to come back from the injury, any effects you still feel now, and how it changed your game.
So,
take us through it.
I was a purple belt at the time. I just got my purple belt, and I was going through like a little bit of like a quarter life crisis at the time. Like I'd just come out of a long
I like that term, a quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
I feel like I had a midlife crisis at 23.
Yeah. Yeah, well I would have been around, but no, I was about 25, 26. I'd just come out of a long-term relationship. I was getting fed up on my job. A few of my mates, my close friends, one of which was in the, one directed the MC Fathead video. The other was in the MC Fathead video, Perm Dog. James Bruce and Ryan Broom, they had been travelling for about 1.5 years at this point, and they were coming back to England, but then they were going to go again to South America. And they kind of got me here and said, like, come with us. Like, we're like, you're single now, sack that job off, you'll get another job. Like, we'll come back, save some money, and come with us this next time. We're going to go to South America. So I knew I was going to do that. Like, I knew I was going to do that. But my intention was to do a bit of training whilst I was out there. I was going to go and hopefully maybe get to Brazil, do some training in Brazil, that kind of thing. I just got my purple belt. I think I competed like at least a couple of times at purple. But then I was training one day with my friend Dave Hill. We were just having like a morning session. I think it was a Friday morning.
And sorry, quick side note, that's the Dave Hill that fought Conor McGregor.
Dave Hill who fought Conor McGregor, yeah. Good friend of mine, Dave Hill. I believe he's still training. He trains over at Kev's now, but I haven't seen Dave for, I think the last time I properly seen Dave was at his wedding, which was 3 or 4 years ago now. He's had 2 kids since then, but it'd be nice to bump into Dave when I go to Kev's end of year grading, which is in a few weeks. But I was training with Dave, and it was a Friday morning. I think I'd had the morning off work or something. It might have even been the Easter weekend. But I remember it was a Friday morning, and I trained with Dave, and then didn't feel anything go in the session or anything like that. I'd had hiccups in my back before. My dad's had major back problems. My dad was a centre forward playing football, like jumping up in the air, heading the ball, landing back down on the ground. It deteriorates the lower spine over time. My dad actually had a part of his vertebrae break off, and it was floating up and down his spinal canal. And I remember when I was a young kid, my dad being in absolute agony, screaming on the bathroom floor, having the ambulance called out once or twice. When he was in that much pain, he could barely function. And eventually they got to the root cause of it and dislodged a bit of bone or marrow, whatever it was, floating up and down his spinal canal, touching on his nerve. So it was kind of hereditary as well. I'd had a few hiccups where I'd had like sciatica and like the pinch in my bum cheek where I feel like stiff and everything else, but nothing compared to this. And I remember I got home from that session with Dave, everything was fine, didn't feel anything in particular go in the session. But then the later the day got on, I started to feel sorer and sorer, and then I woke up the next morning and I was in agony. Like, it was all shooting down my leg, my arse cheek was clenched up, like I had proper like nerve pain, you know what I mean, down my leg, sciatica. And it was like someone shoved a red hot poker at the bottom of my spine. I'd lost tons of mobility in my legs. Like I couldn't lift my legs up if I was laying on my back. It was really, really bad. And I knew from previous experience with like similar back injuries that weren't as permanent, that diclofenac was the only painkiller that touched it. So straight away I got myself to the doctors. I need diclofenac. They sorted me out a prescription. So I started taking diclofenac, and then it didn't subside. Usually I'd take that diclofenac for like a couple of weeks and it'd go away. But this didn't subside. I was needing to have diclofenac to sleep. I was waking up on like clockwork every morning when the painkiller would wear off, and I'd start to feel the pain erupting at the bottom of my spine. And like I say, me and my friends had planned to go on this trip to South America. This was imminent. I weren't cancelling that. So I knew you didn't need a prescription in South America to get drugs.
Yeah.
So I just went, I took what I had with me and just carried on getting it out there from chemists and stuff, diclofenac, and I was living off the stuff for probably 3 or 4 times longer than I should have been using that kind of medication, because it's no good for your stomach lining. It has a lot of negative.
I was going to say, did you feel any effects?
Well, my stomach line is probably never going to be the same, but no, to be honest, I didn't feel any effects, luckily. Like when I ended up coming off it after my operation, I definitely did have like a teething period where I was in some like placebo effect, where I felt like the operation hadn't done its job and I could still feel the pain, when really that would have just been the pain from healing. Do you know what I mean?
No.
But I went away traveling around South America with my mates, popping prescription pills, like getting by, just like keeping the pain at bay. And then after, like, we went away for like 5 or 6 months, about 5 months, flew back and got myself to the doctors again, had an MRI. They noticed that my lower disc in my back had like prolapsed and was protruding and was just wedged straight against the nerve, causing me all this pain. Like they never recommended anything, but I think looking back on it, I maybe should have tried some kind of physiotherapy, some kind of yoga, some kind of mobility work to try and shift it. But they just ushered me straight into surgery, had a microdiscectomy. I was on the waiting list for a short while. And then I had my operation, which was obviously more time off. I never knew if I would get back into jiu-jitsu, if I'm totally honest, because altogether I probably had about 18 months off. I probably had...
And how old were you at this point?
26, yeah.
So that's it's an unlikely scenario to be in. You're having back surgery at 26 years old. Well, yeah, what's going through your mind?
Well, I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted the pain to stop. And I got back from my trip around South America and got booked in, had the operation. After a few months, or a few weeks, I know like the pain disappeared and I was off the meds and yeah, like I was sort of like living for the weekend a little bit. Like I say, like, going back to what I said earlier, I've never like gone off the rails or anything like that, but I definitely wasn't fulfilling what I felt like is my potential. I wasn't living a life which I felt like I was fulfilled from. Like I was kind of just living for the weekend. And again, I got back into a job, which was an okay job, like had some good times there, but it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. Do you know what I mean? I knew that deep down. It was just a means to an end at the time, like another office job. I was project managing. And they were good enough to let me have the time off to have my surgery and everything else. I'd only been with them a few months at that point as well. I ended up being there for 4 years. But yeah, I didn't know what was going to be happening during that time. And then again, Mark Timms, my saviour, shall we say, like he got me into it at the very beginning. And I remember he come back. He was away at this time. I think he was living in China, like he'd gone abroad to pursue his kickboxing. He wasn't getting fights in the UK, not as much as he would want to. Like I say, he wanted to compete as much as possible to familiarise himself with the nerves, the anxiety, to be able to perform at the level he was able to in the gym, that kind of thing, and take his talents to the furthest they could go. So he went around Australia, America. I think he was actually located in China at this point, fighting pretty much every month. And then he come back for whatever reason that it was. He come back and it was like a brief interval before he went somewhere else, come back to see his mum, and he started teaching a little bit of kickboxing at Spartans in Hinckley, which is a local like kickboxing school, like traditional kickboxing school where I live. And he doesn't ask, he tells Mark. He was like, yeah, I think you should start teaching jiu-jitsu here. He was like, you should start teaching jiu-jitsu. I'll have a word with Kerry there. And he was like, we'll sort something out. And within a few weeks of him suggesting that, I was teaching jiu-jitsu there. Like I started teaching purely just on a Tuesday night. And then that Tuesday night turned into a Tuesday and a Friday night.
So, sorry, had you gone back to training at this point, or you just went straight into
No. Well, what happened was, he recommended, like he basically got the ball rolling with that. So then I started going back to combat and exercise. I went to Ryan and started training with Ryan, and mate, I was so rusty. Like I was a purple belt, walked back in. I remember Brad Boyden was a white belt at the time. Brad's wicked, man, like beast.
Yeah.
Also Will as well. Like they were both white belts at the time. Brad especially was giving me a hard time, but Will as well. Like Brad's a big, strong boy, but Will's like at the time was quite skinny. And I was going training as a purple belt and getting my ass handed to me by these white belts, let alone like Ryan and all of his coloured belts and people like that. And it was kind of a make or break for me. It was like, you're either going to stick this out or you're going to just fuck this off completely. And I think if it hadn't been for the teaching alongside of it, I might have thought, this ain't really worth it. Like my ego can't take this. Like, I've worked hard enough to get to this point. I'm not willing to do it all over again. But with the encouragement of Ryan and the boys there I got close to, and like I say, I'm still good friends with to this day. I remember it actually, if the first time I actually got back into training after my back injury was with Shady, with Aiden. I spoke to him about thinking about getting back into jiu-jitsu, and he was doing a little bit of teaching himself just with a few of his mates at this gym in Coventry called Red Corner. And they'd basically rent the mat space and have a roll. And he was like, just come along one Sunday. And it was him who got me back into it. And then he was like, start coming to combat with me and Ryan. So then I started going back there. So I have Shady to thank for a lot, and I have Ryan to thank for a lot for getting me back into it. And then guys like Will and Brad for like, as much as they used to beat me up and give me a hard time, like they become good friends and help me to carry on. Do you know what I mean? And I started teaching at Spartans with the influence and push that Mark gave me. That started off as one class a week. It turned into a Friday and a Sunday morning. So a Friday night, Tuesday night, Friday night, and a Sunday morning I was teaching by the end of it. And it was nothing against Ryan or anything like that. Like, Ryan's brilliant. Like, tons of time for Ryan. Like, I genuinely believe if Ryan had a coach, Ryan would be one of the best guys in the UK. But Ryan sort of took on combat and exercise. When Kev left, there was another guy called Rob Stevens, who was a black belt as well. He sort of took it on after Kev at combat and exercise, but he's an old guy. Like, and after a while, I don't think his body could hack it anymore. I think he wasn't as enthusiastic and as passionate as he once was either. So he handed that off to Ryan. So from like a high-end blue belt / purple belt, Ryan was his own coach, and he was pretty much running that gym, coaching himself. He'd go certain places as well to train, but he was mainly just totally based out of combat under himself. He didn't have he didn't have no coaches, no tuition from an outside source really. And he didn't drive either for quite a while, so he couldn't get places. He lived in Nuneaton, he trained in Nuneaton. And I started back with him. But once I got the ball rolling again and back into the swing of things, I still popped in occasionally to train with Ryan, but I was like, right, I want to get back to Kev. So I started going back over to Kev, making the commute to Birmingham. He was still based in Birmingham at Stevie B's at the time. So I started going back over to Kev twice a week, and then I'd teach 3 times a week. And that's where like it really started to progress from there.
Yeah. So how old are you at this point?
27, about 27.
And what year's this? We're getting fairly close.
This is
now
2000.
To present day.
Yeah, this is 2007, 2018. My girlfriend, my missus Kelsey, was a massive influence as well. If it hadn't been for meeting Kelsey and getting with Kelsey after I got back with South America, like when I was like living the lifestyle I was, like just living for the weekends, not really going anywhere, working a job I didn't like, as much as I wanted to do a good job and I liked the people there, it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. Like, I always expected more from myself out of life. I just didn't know what it was until I started coaching. And then I thought, like, as soon as I started coaching and having a little bit of success with the lads at competitions and stuff, and built that camaraderie between the team. Because at first it was literally just Max and Martin that I was teaching. I had 2 or 3 students, which turned into 5 or 6 students. And that small core little group that depended on me and kept showing up, they got me to where I am today. So there's a lot of people I have to thank, Aaron. A lot of people I have to thank. Obviously, Kev would not be here without Kev. Ryan Shady, Will, Brad. But then Max Young and Martin Shipley, like, without them, I would have given up on the coaching because it wouldn't have been worth it. I was paying to teach at one point. Like, the mat hire was 15 quid. I charged people £5 a class, and there was 2 people turning up. So I was paying a £5 to teach. But then along with Kelsey as well, like, when you meet the right person, you don't just want to do well for yourself. You want to do well for them. You want to be the best version of yourself for them. And Kelsey always encouraged me, always pushed me. She wasn't one of these girls who'd moan when I went training. She kind of met me when that was who I was. And like, she at no point ever tried to like change me or convince me otherwise. And I've been quite lucky because like the girl I was with before Kelsey never really discouraged me from training or anything like that. But Kelsey, especially when I got back into it with everything I was going through, like obviously my confidence was low and everything else, she did encourage me to keep on training, and yeah, she was a big motivator and supporter and component in getting me to where I am today. Yeah, obviously along with Jimmy when we get to the point that I meet Jimmy, yeah, which ain't far off from where we're talking now.
Yeah. But on that note, you say it all the time, and it really sticks with me because it's so true. You always say, girls, for young men especially, you know, those of us that are dedicated to training, they'll either be the biggest blessing or the biggest burden.
Yeah, a woman in this game, and it doesn't necessarily mean combat sport, but combat sport especially, it's a selfish game. Yeah, you need to be all in or all out. If you actually want to do anything, it's different if you're just doing it for a hobby and to just get out of the house a couple of nights or a couple of hours a week. But if you want to do this properly, you've got to be all in. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's too dangerous. There's too many components to it. It's too hard. It's too difficult. You've got to be all in. And a good girl will will be alongside you and serve a purpose of motivating you, encouraging you. The wrong girl will distract you with either external drama or wanting you to herself by not understanding the process. And then I'm not saying this is like a woman-hating thing. Like, why would a woman understand why a bloke wants to go and roll around with his mates, sweaty and like
you raise a good point.
Other blokes and doing whatever it is we do, punching lumps out of one another. Why would they get behind that? Like but it takes a special sort of girl to maybe put aside her own emotions and her own wants and needs to see the man she loves and think he actually wants to do this and he's a better person because of this, and I want to support that and I want to get behind that, and that's what Kelsey did for me, and that's what I see the good girls with the lads that I teach or train alongside do for them as well. Like the ones who are constantly in their ear, nagging, draining, everything else, like it has a negative effect. A happy fighter is a dangerous fighter, and if you constantly have an external stress and everything else, then it will eventually creep its way into your training, into your performances, into your life, just in general. Like you can't be around that negative energy in whatever you do, let alone this. Like it will break you down. Like that toxic form of relationship will break you down, whereas the right sort of woman will encourage you and support you to do well. And by encouraging and supporting, it doesn't mean Kelsey was like patting my back every day and go on babe, you can do it. But like you see what you've got with someone like that and how happy you are and how happy she makes you, and you want to be the best version of yourself for that person. So you do whatever you can to fulfill your potential, not just for you, for them as well. You're not just working for yourself anymore. And I imagine when you have kids, it grows tenfold. Do you know what I mean? It grows tenfold. Yeah. I've got a missus and a dog, and I want to be the best I can be for them. Like, let alone if I ever have kids. Yeah. I see it with guys like Jimmy, like that dad power. Do you know what I mean? They call it the dad power, don't it? Like he's doing it for his kids. He's not just doing it for himself. Like he's doing it for his kids. Yeah. He's setting up their future. He's setting an example. He's trying to be the role model he would have wanted at that age. Do you know what I mean? For them, like, and he never ever pushes his kids to do what he does. And like, I think George has done a little bit. She's obviously a teenage girl now, going off doing her own thing. But Junior's started to do a little bit more now, and never once has Jimmy forced him to, but just through the positive influence and role model that he is, and like what he is in terms of his career and everything he's doing. I think Junior now is getting to an age where he can respect and appreciate that and think, you know what, my dad's pretty cool. I want to be like my dad. Yeah.
On the topic of Jimmy then, you've started coaching at Spartans. How did you end up meeting Jimmy? How did you end up at what was then Hardy Wallhead?
Yeah, so again, Mark again, he said, I remember I was teaching a lad called Corin at the time. Great lad, really talented. For whatever reason, life got in the way and he sacked it off after a little while. But props to Corin if you're listening. I doubt he is, but yeah, he's a good lad, man. But he wanted to fight MMA. He started doing a couple of PTs with Mark when Mark was back and doing that little bit of coaching.
Sorry, just on another side note as well with Mark, I feel like it's important to say, like, Mark is such a high level kickboxer, isn't he? You know, he really knows what he's talking about. He trains, you know, with Izzy, with and Hooker and all those guys out in Australia. Timms, New Zealand now, doesn't he?
Mark Timms, yeah, one of my childhood friends I've known since I was literally 6 or 7 years old. Like, we pretty much grew up together through school and through life. His mum's great, but he didn't come from a lot. You know what I mean? It's not like he was come from a privileged background or anything like that. He grew up struggling, should we say, in the most respectful way. Like, his mum did everything she could for him, but it's just what it was. Like, he's come from, like, he had a relationship with his dad, but he was based with his mum and everything else. And he grew up fending for himself. And Mark was a rough lad growing up. Like, he was a tough lad. He's always been hard, Mark has, yeah. And he got into kickboxing. Like, he made the decision to change his life for whatever reason. Like, maybe one day you could have him on here, but he made the decision to change his life for whatever reason. And at first, that started with education, going to college, going to university, and then through university, he started training at K-Star. And I think once he found K-Star, the idea he had of becoming a journalist or whatever it was at the time quickly changed and he wanted to do this. And he had a number of fights in this country and then went into pursue his passion overseas, and went and trained out in America, Australia, China, and eventually in China he actually fought Israel Adesanya in a tournament in New Zealand when he was living in Australia, I think. They became quite close after the fight, and remained like in touch. And when Mark was in China, I believe the story is Israel went out to train in China and their relationship grew, and then it sort of got to the point where Mark needed to know where he was going to go next. It turned out to be New Zealand, and he ended up going to New Zealand, working at Dan Hooker's gym to begin with through Israel's reference. Oh, there's a guy coming, he'll be a great kickboxing instructor for your gym, which Dan Hooker had opened at the time, which was Combat Academy. I don't think it's there anymore, but that's where Mark first started off when he got to New Zealand, and then eventually he embedded himself into the fabric of CKB, and he started coaching alongside the other coaches there, padding Israel, sparring the other guys. He went out to Miami when Israel knocked out Poatan. He's cornered all like the lower level fighters all the way up to the top guys. He's had dealings in their camps and inputs in their camps, and to see where he's come from, like I say, like I've got very few heroes in my life. Like I don't throw that word around, but Mark Timms is definitely like alongside my dad and someone like Jim. I'd probably say Mark Timms is one of my real life heroes. Yeah, to see where he's come from to where he's at now is can't say enough good things about Mark. But yeah, going back to the point,
it was down to him again.
It was down to him again. Corin had started having a few PTs with Mark, and he wanted to fight MMA, and Mark had got wind that there was a new gym opening in Colville called Hardy Wallhead, which was going to be opened up by UK MMA veterans Jimmy and Dan Hardy, Jimmy Wallhead and Dan Hardy. And he sort of recommended the place to Corin, and Corin then started doing a bit of grappling with me, a bit of kickboxing with Mark, and we were kind of waiting for the grand opening of Hardy Wallhead. Like the news was out there that it was opening, but it wasn't open yet. And then eventually it opened. I think it opened 2018. Corin migrated across there, started training in the mornings and stuff. Still was doing his stuff with me. Mark had gone back overseas at this point, and then, I thought I'll go over there and do a bit as well, because I started doing a bit of kickboxing and stuff with Mark at this time when he was teaching back in the UK. I'd never really done any strike. I'd done bits and bobs here and there, but I'd never consistently done any form of striking. And Mark sort of, I know I was useless at that to start off with as well. Jesus wept. I think Mark thought I had dyspraxia or something. But he got me into doing a bit of kickboxing, which obviously I still like to train at least a couple of times a week to this day. And not that I'm very good at it, but I enjoy doing it.
Don't sell yourself short, man. Don't let what Jimmy's going to say get in your ear.
No, mate, Jimmy, if anything.
Yeah, I know. When Jimmy's talking seriously,
he
gives you the respect he deserves, but he heckles you plenty as well.
Yeah, it's all affectionate though. But I started doing a bit of kickboxing with Mark, and then I thought, I can go and do kickboxing at Hardy Wallhead and maybe do a bit of grappling there, a bit of grappling at Kev's, and then teach at Spartan. So then by this point now, I was training like every day. And I'd only ever in the past, just due to the distance I was traveling and other commitments in my life, I'd only ever managed to train like 3-4 times a week. Now I was either teaching or training every day. So I started doing a bit of kickboxing over at Hardy Wallhead and jumped on a couple of grappling classes. And then I think my mate Danny Turnbull had messaged Jimmy privately on Instagram, just saying like, I know you've got a gym opening up. He doesn't know Jimmy or anything. He just did it like to be sound, I think. Like as much as Danny can be a wind-up merchant, he's always got my back. You know what I mean? And he knew deep down that I was taking the teaching thing kind of serious. And I think he messaged Jimmy, made Jimmy aware that I was coming over. I was already going over and to have a chat with me, sort of thing. I think Danny might have been over once or twice himself as well. I remember being at Hardy Wallhead with Danny before. Danny did a bit of Thai or kickboxing there as well. He's done a bit of jiu-jitsu with me. He's dabbled, Danny has. And then Corin had brought me up to Jimmy as well. I'm doing my jiu-jitsu with this lad called Joe. And then one thing led to another, and me and Jimmy got chatting. And then I remember he collared me in the garage up the road from Hardy Wallhead one day. He was just about to have his second fight in Bellator after his comeback with the Italian Bear, I think it's Petrini. And it was like the week before the fight. And I remember he said, like, let me get this fight done, and then we need a chat, like a proper chat. I've heard some stuff about you. And he, at the time, Jimmy was pretty much coaching every class. He was like, I could do with the help. So he fought Petrini, won, broke his hand in the fight, still managed to win. Pretty amazing performance. And he had that conversation with me after the fight. He was a man of his word and said, look, cancel your membership. I want you to start teaching here a couple of times a week. And at first I just taught 2 gi classes twice a week. I just had my free membership. He was like, look, if you want to do any PTs, anything like that, use the facility. It's yours to train. It's yours to PT. I don't expect no commission. Just teach from there. You can have your membership on the house, teach those classes, and it'll be a weight off my shoulders sort of thing. Because, like I say, he was doing it all at the time. So then I started doing that and familiarised myself with all the guys at HW1. And the rest is history, really. Do you know what I mean? Like, he just showed, for whatever reason, I don't know why. He'd watched a little bit of me on Instagram, I think, from what Danny had sent him and from what Corin had said, but he showed just an almost deluded amount of belief in employing me.
It all happened incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
Because if I'm correct, I think the gym opened April 2019, and I started coming September 2019 is when I first came. And when I rocked up on that first day, you know, as far as I was aware, you'd been an integral part and were an integral part of this gym, you know what I mean, from the very get-go. It didn't seem as though this was a coaching position you just took on.
No, and it was like that. Jimmy made me feel like that straight away for whatever reason. He's seen something in me that I don't even think I've seen in myself. And whether it was valid or whether it was a deluded level of belief, he just employed me as head jiu-jitsu coach at his gym.
Valid, man. Look at where we are today.
He just. I was working a full-time job at the time, so I teach there in the evenings, but then I'd do a few classes striking and stuff with him. And before I knew it, he was like handing over no-gi classes to me. So I taught a couple of no-gi classes there. I was teaching the gi regular classes there, and just sort of like, again, snowballed from there. And in the end, it took up that much of my time that I had to part ways with Spartans. I'll always have like time for Kerry and the opportunity that she gave me. Very grateful of it. She kick-started my coaching career, should we say. And then Jimmy blossomed it into fruition and allowed me to be in the position now where I do what I love full time without having to rely on any other form of income. Obviously, Andy and Brett are a massive part of that as well. I owe them a massive amount of thanks for opening up the gym up the road and giving me the position of head jiu-jitsu coach and paying me a salary which allows me to do this full time now. But yeah, just a lot of people, for whatever reason, believing in me and pushing me and allowing me to have the opportunities and chances that I've been given. I think a lot of it is down to luck, mate, to be honest. I think a lot of it is down to luck. Yeah, like I know what I'm on with to some degree, but there's guys out there I wouldn't even mention myself in the same sentence as. Do you know what I mean?
Don't discount yourself.
But that is, I'm not trying to be.
Seeing you. I know you're not trying to be.
I'm not trying to be overly humble or anything like that. But like there's guy like someone like Ryan. I think Ryan's fucking awesome. You know what I mean? I think Ryan's awesome. Kev's awesome. I mean, yeah, they've got their own gyms as well, but like, just guys on like the level of Jimmy. Like, I'm not. I don't put myself in the same sentence as someone like that. What he's achieved, lifelong martial artist, 50+ pro MMA fights, judo black belt, BJJ black belt, representing England at youth level for judo. Do you know what I mean? He could go and compete now. He talks shit and plays it down. He's like, oh, I'm just an MMA guy. He could go and do ADCC trials, and if he trained for it, I'm pretty sure he'd medal in it. And he could compete on a show like Polaris or Grapple Fest, no problems, and beat totally legit seasoned jiu-jitsu guys with what skills he has. I have no doubt. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of luck, circumstance, being in the right place at the right time. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Everything sort of just fell into place, and over a few years of being at HW1, gradually like meeting Zach and Jake, who are Brett and Andy's sons, getting into coaching them, and then Brett and Andy wanting to invest and open up the gym up the road. It's led me to where I am now, coaching full-time jiu-jitsu and having a fair bit to do with the MMA as well. Do you know what I mean? Like I've cornered tons of fights now, like pro, amateur, like IMAF level, the Four Nations, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't cornered at a UFC event yet, but I'm sure hopefully at some point, like fingers crossed, one of the lads is going to make it to that stage. But I've cornered on pretty much every show on the regional scene, and yeah, professional, amateur. I've been lucky to be able to have those experiences. Yeah, and that's all down to just Jimmy, for whatever reason, like, yeah, giving me the opportunity. Do you know what I mean? Wanting me there alongside him.
Value in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to go into that specifically. The transition between teaching jiu-jitsu, well, like strict jiu-jitsu, strict grappling, and then obviously now you're a grappling coach at an MMA gym. Obviously we have, straight grapplers, people like myself that compete just jits, but we're predominantly an MMA gym. Talk me through that transition of coaching strict jits to coaching jiu-jitsu for MMA, and then the process of going into cornering MMA fights and how that's different from, say, coaching a jiu-jitsu comp.
Yeah, so I started out teaching in the gi, which obviously is not specific to MMA at all. When I started coaching at Hardy Wallhead, it was my first two classes Jimmy gave me to me was the gi. And although I started in the gi and my roots were in the gi, it's not really overly familiar to MMA, is it? The Brazilians, or some of them, like to make out, "Oh, you must train in the gi." I'm not going to.
It makes you better. Yeah. Training in the gi makes you better in no gi. So I think now that's a myth that's been twisted.
I think to some level, when you first start training, gi, no gi, just grapple. MMA, just grapple. Judo, wrestle, just grapple, and you'll accelerate. But if you only want to compete in no gi, you don't need to train in the gi. If you only want to fight MMA, you train in the gi if you want to, but like it's not going to make that much of a difference. When you're first learning the fundamentals, getting to that like blue belt level, I think gi, no gi, just do as much as you can, as often as you can. But I started coaching in the gi, and just from like listening to Jimmy and I've always been a fan of MMA. Do you know what I mean? And Kev taught MMA for quite a while as well, so just picking up on little coaching cues and things that I'd heard him say, or things that I'd seen him show, and listening to Jimmy as well. Because Kev, he only coached MMA for a few years, and then I think he just realised like the jiu-jitsu was far more profitable and far more popular. He just eventually what would be the word? Dissolved the MMA part of his coaching and just focused totally on the jiu-jitsu. But he did all right. Kev did. There weren't many fighters that lost when he was coaching that little team. Like he got Chris Mia I think Chris was a pro when he started, but he got Chris Mia to win fights on Bama and shows like that. And he had a number of other pros fight for him. And then his amateur record was pretty much flawless. We lost a handful here and there, but quite a couple of times I remember the Pariah team going like 3-0 or 4-1 or 2-0, or do you know what I mean, on shows like that. So I'd had like an insight through Kev, and then obviously started training with Jimmy and listening to Jimmy and stuff like that. And obviously through my love of MMA and watching the sport religiously since the age of like 19, 20, had a good 10 years by this point of like being able to tell the difference between a grappling match and an MMA fight. And I think the main difference is in grappling, obviously it's about scoring points, and there's like a massive focus on submissions because it's the only way you can finish your match.
Chasing the sub. You were prioritising, depending on the rules, that you were prioritising points heavily, or you're really chasing those submissions and submission
attempts, and you know what I mean, submission attempts. Yeah. Whereas in MMA, it's a lot about position before submission, like finding positions where you're comfortable to strike from, putting them into positions where they're working harder than you. There's not really guard passing as much as people do pass the guard and work from side control or pass them out or whatever. A lot of work like is done, and I learned this like very much from Jimmy because he's a master of this, like locking someone down in their half guard and forcing them to play half guard. You see Gordon Ryan do a similar thing in straight jiu-jitsu. He'll force people to play half guard because that's a guard he feels most competent passing. I believe a lot of Gordon's systems of passing come from the half guard, so he forces people to play half guard even if it's not really their type of game, and will pass them from there. And in MMA, Jimmy will win a takedown, get to half guard and just find a position in the half guard where he can chip away with strikes, get people frustrated, get people to try and react erratically. That's where he might look to wrap up his submission or land a more devastating shot or progress to the next position. But he always says you're connected in the half guard, you're attached to them. If you start, when it's slippy and wet, if you start trying to go bare chested with someone in side control, they can spin. Like MMA fighters, they're tenacious, they're strong, they're powerful. They can spin out the back door, they can roid up on top, they can reverse you. So just learning to control someone on top, getting between the cage, and like learning the positions where you can, it's ground and pound. Like I think people think ground and pound is just like winging it. You know what I mean? There's
Donkey Kong.
Yeah. Ground and pound is a skill. It's an art form
Yeah.
as much as striking on the feet, as much as grappling, as much as wrestling on the wall. Each component of MMA has its own skill set which needs to be applied. And like through training with Jimmy, I got to learn a lot on the wall and stuff. Only now am I really getting to a point where I feel competent on the wall, and I've been training with Jimmy nearly 5 years. But I remember being a grappler, like you'd think like, well, as soon as I get hold of them, I'll be all right. But you go against these MMA lads who are well versed on the wall, like you ain't getting them down.
Yeah.
You ain't getting them down like with just what you know on the floor. No chance. And even out in the open, the wrestling and jiu-jitsu like crossover, like just because you're good, just because you're good on the ground doesn't mean that you're going to be good on the feet grappling. Like you get a good wrestler can stall out a jiu-jitsu guy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you add the striking to takedowns, that's another dynamic altogether. So there's wrestling like without strikes, straight grappling, and then there's wrestling with strikes. And a lot of the time, wrestling with strikes, although it's more dangerous, it's a little bit easier to get in on your shots because you can feint the jab or start to throw shots to the head to bring the hands up. It opens up the hips, you can shoot in. So all of this stuff I learned through training with Jimmy and getting my ass beat, and eventually like starting coming in the mornings and stuff during COVID, like when I had a few years where I was dotting between different jobs and stuff. I had quite a turbulent time, but I actually got to train quite a lot during that time, especially when stuff started to open up again. I had the opportunity to train at the old Hardy Wallhead full time. Like I wasn't getting a wage or anything then, but I was obviously living off PT money, that kind of thing, living at home. So I didn't really have any bills or outgoings. And I got to train with the pro team a lot in the morning for a good 6 or so months. And during that period, I got my black belt as well off Kevin. So that was a good time where I picked up a lot. And then obviously since I started here at the beginning of the year, every morning I'm in listening to Jimmy, who's like, yeah, he's got a wealth of knowledge. He's like a godfather of UK MMA, and he like listening to how he teaches and how he shows things, and watching him spar as well. Because a lot of what he does in his spars, like I don't think he's managed to break it down to teach it, because his coaching career is very young. Do you know what I mean? Like I think a lot of what he does still, even though he's an absolutely phenomenal coach and has brought guys up to a fantastic level, like got Dean Truman to a world championship level, coached multiple amateur fighters, multiple pro fighters. He still, I don't think, is on the level of the fighter that he was. And although Jimmy might not have reached the heights that some of his teammates and people did at the time during the roughhouse era and stuff like that, I always say a lot of why Jimmy didn't get to where he was is because of circumstance and situation, not because of ability or skill. Like he's had a lot go on. Like Jimmy should have definitely fought in the UFC and been a solid top 10 guy in the UFC. Would he have won a world title? I don't know. But I definitely think he's good enough to. I definitely think he's good enough to win a world title in the UFC or Bellator in his prime. And even now, the bloke's a beast. You know what I mean? Yeah. The bloke is an absolute beast. It's just, his own head sometimes has let himself down and circumstance and situation. But like guys like Dan, Daly, Andre, they all had their stint in the UFC. Jimmy's come a little bit late. It's unfortunate, but I hope that he can reap the success he deserved in his fighting career and his coaching career. But I don't think you've even scratched the surface of his coaching career just yet. I think there's a lot more to come from that. Yeah.
You mentioned getting your black belt.
Yeah.
Let's touch on that. What was that moment like? What did getting your black belt mean to you? To your journey?
Yeah, it was. I don't get me wrong. Like I didn't like break down in tears or anything like that. But I'm glad I could get it off Kev. I'm glad I've got every belt off Kev. Like, every belt I've ever had, I've had off Kev, and I'm pretty proud of that. Like, I hope that a few of you guys get every belt off me. You know what I mean? So we have that relationship through and through. Like, well, no matter what I've been through, wherever I've gone, like, whatever love lost or love gained from training in jiu-jitsu, I've always gone back to Kev. He's been there every step of the way. And as much as, like, I don't see much of him anymore, just through obligations and stuff I have at this gym and not being able to get over there as much as I'd like to. I hope Kev knows, like, I wouldn't be here without him, and I wouldn't have wanted to have got that black belt off anyone other than Kev. So it was a lovely fruition of a decade of hard work. You know what I mean? And then after, or when I got the belt as well, like Jimmy, Josh, Riley, Max, they all came along, and then I had people there like Shady, Will, Brad, they were all there. The only person who was missing, unfortunately, was Ryan Hodgetts, just because, again, he's got his own gym. It would have been lovely for him to have been there, but like, it was great just to have all them people there to see me reach that milestone. And yeah, like they say, the journey starts at black belt, don't they? That's what they say. So yeah, I believe now.
Do you feel that?
I don't really put too much emphasis on the belts, to be honest. I'd rather be, like I always tell, like, white belts who are nagging for a blue belt or hinting at a blue belt, be the best white belt you can rather than the worst blue belt. You know what I mean?
Belts don't matter.
But I was the same when I was younger. Like, you want to be, like, especially that blue belt. Like, that's the first, like, bit of respect you get. Do you know what I mean? You're not just a white belt anymore. You do. But Kev always taught me as well, everyone has their own glass ceiling. Someone might get a blue belt before you, but you might smash them in the gym.
It's very subjective, is it?
Yeah.
And I think that's how it should be. Not everyone should get, as much as they originally were objective standards. Nowadays, you have people coming in who are just hobbyists that want to train now and then. Then you have people that want to get to ADCC. What a blue belt is to a hobbyist is going to be, it should be, I think, very different to what a blue belt is.
It's learning the core. It's sorry to interrupt, but it's learning the core fundamentals of grappling. That's basically what it symbolises. That you've got an answer from a number of different positions, on top and on bottom. That's like what I believe a blue belt symbolises. Now, when someone like Jack Henshaw gets their blue belt, it's going to be a little bit different. Or when Josh Hamilton gets his blue belt, it's going to be a little bit different to when, I'm not going to name anyone, but just a hobbyist who comes twice a week gets their blue belt. Like, as much as a hobbyist who comes twice a week could get to a pretty decent level where they're able to give someone like Josh, Jack, yourself work, like, their goal, their ambition, their potential is on a totally different trajectory to yourselves. You know what I mean? So, like, some guys get held back a little bit longer who maybe feel like they should be graded a little bit sooner, but it's only because you want to see them tick every box at white belt or tick every box at whatever belt they're at before you offer them that promotion. So Kev always used to say, like, when you get your blue belt, you can hang as a blue belt. You're not just going to be starting at the bottom of the barrel again, or bottom of the ladder, whatever the saying is. You're going to be going in there with the ability to win matches, and then over time, as you grow into your blue belt, you'll start winning medals. You know what I mean? And the same goes for a purple, a brown, and a black. I believe now, like, a lot of these guys, like, you might even say blue belts, but definitely purple belts. There's purple belts out there who could hang with black belts, submit black belts.
It's kind of a crazy mix now, isn't it?
Like that Owen kid, that Owen kid who won trials, what a phenom he is. Like, he's absolutely unreal. You know what I mean? And he's only just got his brown belt.
Yeah.
He's only just got his brown belt.
When realistic, you know what I mean? And again, that's it. It's almost diverging now. The belts, your very specific technicalities of your game. But I think this is a bit of a side note. But I think a big change is happening in jiu-jitsu, where before people, took on jiu-jitsu as a hobby, and then if they ended up being good at it, then they'd go pro and make something out of it. Whereas now, because it's becoming more of an established sport, people that are athletic, that are young and thinking, I want to be an athlete as a career, you're getting people in that bracket now thinking, okay, I want to choose jiu-jitsu. Whereas before, it wasn't an athlete sport. It was, I want to do jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu. I'm doing it as a hobby. I'm pretty good at it. One thing leads to another. Whereas now people are going in with the intention of, I want to be an athlete. I want to go pro. And because of that, you're getting people that are developing very quickly. So even though they don't have all the P's and Q's to be given a black belt yet, they're so athletic and they're so good at applying the techniques that they know that in competition, on the stages where it matters, they're already winning at the black belt level, like Owen Jones or like Nicky Rod, is he still a purple belt, Nicky Rod?
No, I think he's a brown belt.
He's a brown belt now, but he got a silver medal at the ADCC World Championships when he was a blue belt.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think however long ago, some people might even, like the old school Brazilians, might have this mindset now, but 20, 25 years ago, I think you wouldn't get your blue belt until you were tapping the other blue belts in the gym. Whereas now, like, I see a guy like Kieran Full, Max Young, who's training consistently every day, competing. I see them on a different trajectory to someone who just comes in a couple of hours a week to get away from the missus, to release some endorphins, go home a little bit happier. I judge Kieran and Max on how well they're doing in competition. I judge that guy on, okay, he's got an answer from on bottom now. He knows at least what to do there. He knows what to do here. Oh, he's catching the odd submission now and again. He's learning the dialogue of jiu-jitsu. So, yeah, he's been training a certain amount of time. I think it's time to give him his blue belt. Yeah, to give him that acknowledgement of his progress. Whereas I think the other lads who are actively competing, fighting, whatever else, I don't think they're that or as bothered about the belt. Like, some might disagree with me, but I know for a fact, like Max just wants to be good at jiu-jitsu. Like, yeah. And it's more for me to acknowledge his effort when I give him that belt. Like, that's why I did that little speech for him when I gave him his purple belt, because someone like Max, along with many other figures and characters on the way, he's an integral part of why I am where I am. And now, like, when me and Max roll, mate, it's pretty damn close. You know what I mean? Like, I remember he'd come to Spartans when he first started as a little fat boy. He didn't even want to come. It was his mate who brought him. And his mate ended up binning it off, and Max carried on and is where he is now, coaching, competing. He's not competed in a long time. He's got kids. He's got 2 jobs that he holds down. He's got a lot of priorities and commitments. But yeah, Max is someone who trains for the love of the sport. I don't think he's that bothered about belts. Obviously, one day it'd be brilliant to give him his black belt and for us both to be to be black belts on the mat, having come all this way together and everything else. But I think Max is just in it for, like, yeah, for the journey more than anything. Yeah, but some people that belt, they really like need that acknowledgement that what they're doing isn't a waste of time. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Moving into some kind of like quick fire questions now. Top 3 best people you've rolled with. Top 3 best people.
There's a lot, mate. And I don't want to leave anyone out, but I can't. I'm not just saying it because, mate, I don't even know if he will watch this podcast, but Jimmy is 100% up there. He no one feels like that. Do you know what I mean? No, and he'll just say, "Oh, I'm just a roidhead or whatever else," or "I'm just like it's just Mong strength," or whatever he tries to downplay it with. Like, he is supremely technical and has a strength like I've never felt from anyone. Like, Kev is a phenomenal technician. Kev has got a bigger artillery or a bigger array of submissions and moves. But what Jimmy does, you know what he's going to do. He does 2 or 3 things, but you cannot stop it. You know what I mean? You cannot stop it. You can't with Kev to some degree, but Kev does a lot more. Whereas with Jimmy, it's our roles go exactly the same pretty much every time. And I've rolled and been lucky enough to roll with a lot of good people, and no one quite feels like Jimmy. Like, the way like his grips feel, the way like he feels when you try and move him, it's like he's got roots, and like he just embeds himself into the mat. He's unsweepable. Like, mate, I might have swept him once or twice. I've never come close to a takedown on him, and nor have I ever submitted him. Do you know what I mean? So for that fact alone, like, he's got to be, if not number 1, then at least joint first. Do you know what I mean? Like, he is like, he feels like he doesn't have blood running through his veins. He reminds me of like a Marvel character or something. Like, when he tenses, he just turns like into concrete. It's like he's got liquid concrete running through his veins, and he can just turn into like a brick man or something. I don't know what his name would be if he was a superhero, but he ain't far off one. He's an absolute beast. And anyone who's rolled with him will say the same. Like Paul Lukowski, phenomenal black belt, phenomenal teacher, sings Jimmy's praises all the time. Shane Curtis sings Jimmy's praises all the time. Both of them guys, they have to have a mention. Been fortunate to train with them, learn from them. Really, really good, both of them. But if I had to name like 3 of the best guys I've ever rolled with,
So you got Jimmy.
Jimmy Wallhead, Tom Breeze. I was lucky enough to roll with Tom Breeze back in the day a few times. He's really, really good. And then, oh man, it's hard, man, because Kev's got to be in there as well. Yeah. I'd say Kevin, like Kev, Jimmy, Tom, and then if I'm going to throw another one in there, like probably like someone like Shane. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Probably some. But then like there's Ryan Hodgetts, there's like Brad Boyden as well, mate. He was subbing brown and black belts when he was a white belt, mate. And I'm not kidding.
What, Brad?
Yeah. He was.
I can believe it, but I mean that's still shocking because then belts, like we're talking about how belts have changed. You know, when he was a white belt, the belt system was very regimented and integrated.
He's a phenom, Brad. He's a beast. He's like a silverback winner, but it's a different thing to Jimmy again. Like Brad has got silly explosive strength, but he doesn't have that. Like when you roll with Jimmy, that that tension. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a different kind of thing. Brad is like. He's like a crocodile, you know what I mean? He'll just explode out of the water and gator roll you, rip your limb off, you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. Whereas Jimmy, it's like a slow, soul-destroying grind.
The immovable object.
Yeah, the immovable object. But, mate, I genuinely couldn't name 3. I've given you probably 5 or 6 names there. I've been lucky to roll with some pretty good guys. Still plenty of other guys I haven't rolled with that hopefully I'll get the opportunity to one day. But to mention the people I have done, he's doing the best I can for now, yeah.
3 submissions. If you can only do 3 submissions for the rest of your life, for the rest of your jiu-jitsu career, what submissions are those 3?
You've got to start with the rear naked from the back. You can't go about that. Back's king, innit? Like, get to the back. That's pretty much the sole objective of jiu-jitsu.
But for you, specific for you personally.
Really, I do like a choke from the back. Get to the back, trap the arms, choke them. Yeah, it's pretty much checkmate, that is, isn't it? And then I wouldn't be, I don't think I'd be doing myself justice if I didn't say a triangle or an arm bar. But then, to add a third one, Darce. I like a Darce. Yeah, Darce. Jimmy's got a very good Darce game. Kev always had good Darces and stuff. Train like Ryan's got good Darce. I've always trained with guys with good Darce jokes who I've managed to pick up a lot of little details from. And obviously I've got long arms, you know, I'm like Slender Man, Mr. Tickle. So I can get Darces quite a lot from various positions. So yeah, Darce, armbar / triangle, rear naked choke.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a solid 3.
Yeah,
I like it. Would you rather fight 1,000 duck-sized Jimmy Wallheads or a Jimmy Wallhead-sized duck?
A Jimmy Wallhead-sized ducks or 1,000?
So 1,000 Jimmy Wallhead-sized... Wait, sorry. I confused myself on my own question. Jimmy Wallheads, 1,000 Jimmy Wallheads, but they're ducks. They're duck-sized, sorry. Yeah. Or a Jimmy Wallhead-sized duck. So it's a duck.
A Jimmy Wallhead-sized duck all day.
Really? Even though...
Mate, it'd be like that film Small Soldiers. It'd be like Toy Story, but X-rated. 1,000 duck-sized Jimmy Wallheads. Like 10 would be enough, bro. 10 little midget Jimmys.
You want to back yourself against 10 duck-sized Jimmy Wallheads?
Mate, a better chance than I've got against... How many did you say?
1,000.
No chance. Yeah. I'm dead.
So you're going with the Jimmy Wallhead-sized duck?
Jimmy Wallhead-sized duck, yeah. Doesn't mean it's got the skill of Jimmy, does it? It's what's going to do, peck me. It's just going to try and peck me, innit? Or maybe do that like wing arm breaker the Swans do.
Yeah.
Might flip it. So they've not got claws, have they? They've got flippers, isn't they?
No, I don't think so.
No, I reckon they've got a long neck as well. If we get behind it, I'd choke it out.
Well, you couldn't dart it because it doesn't have an arm. But
I could choke it or guillotine it. Yeah. I think 1,000 duck-sized Jimmy. How big's a duck off the table about that? Mate, that's going to be a nightmare.
I don't know, I was thinking very modest ducks.
Nah, but mate, from stud up, they're like that, aren't they? With the neck, the body, the tail, the feet. 1,000 duck-sized Jimmys, mate. 1,000 duck-sized Jimmys could take over Loughborough, mate. Let alone beat me.
That's going on a reel. Yeah. That's going on a reel. That visual image of Jimmy Wallhead storming down Loughborough High Street.
I'd take the duck-sized, the Jimmy-sized duck any day of the week. Easy answer.
Bit more of a serious question. What advice would you give? Well, 2 questions. What advice would you give to people looking to take BJJ or MMA seriously as a competitor? And what advice would you give to people looking to coach BJJ or MMA?
So looking to compete, I think you've just got to be in the gym doing as much as you can. You've got to forget all this other external bullshit. I know it's appealing. I've done it. I've fallen for the trap. I've missed out on sessions when I've gone out and done stuff like that, and you know what I mean, got distracted with the forbidden fruits from the tree, that kind of thing. But you've just got to ignore it all. You've got to ignore it all, even if it means ignoring the misses, ignoring getting a bird, ignoring settling down, ignoring getting that, like yourself on a mortgage, or fulfilling all these other things that seem to be expected of us as men and as adults in this society. It has to be all or nothing. You have to commit yourself 100% totally and just trust the process. The good, the bad, this too shall pass, like as Tom Hanks says. This too shall pass. Like, you will have a great day, you'll have a great week, you'll have a great month. But sooner or later, the dark days are going to come again. The clouds are going to come over you again. You're going to feel like you're shit. You're going to feel like you're useless. You're going to feel like you're an imposter, that you don't belong in this position. And then all of a sudden, something will click and you'll go back around the other end and you'll start thinking, I'm actually all right at this. But never believe your own hype. Never believe your own hype. And also don't count yourself out. As much as you have to be humble, you also have to be your biggest fan. No one's going to believe you're the bollocks if you don't believe you're the bollocks. So I was never a great competitor, mate. So I'm just saying what I see from the guys who I believe are great competitors. They all speak very highly of themselves because it's self-manifestation, and it's convincing themselves. Yeah, some people doing it a little bit more likable way than others, but even guys like Colby and that's all that is. Like, they're convincing themselves. You know what I mean? Like, if they don't believe they're the bollocks, it's theatre, it's pantomime. Like, some of them dress it up a little bit more for the camera, but that's all it is. You've got to believe your own hype, yeah? And then you've got to put in the work to merit the hype as well. And that's pretty much the long and short of it. There's no cheat code. There's no diet, strength conditioning routine, sleep pattern. As much as that will all help and definitely should be taken seriously as well, mat time, skill building, and actually putting yourself through the process of like learning and getting better and throwing yourself into the fire, whether it's competition or just turning up and training on the mat. You've just got to do it. You've got to do it. Win, lose or draw, whether you love it or you hate it. If this is really what you want to do, then you've got to make sure that you're doing it as much as you can. Like, I never did that when I was competing, other than maybe those couple of years. But like, my transformation came when I started doing coaching. I think I was always more destined for that. And I do get imposter syndrome because I've never had an MMA fight. And I never really medalled at any prestigious jiu-jitsu comps, but like, I see the results you guys get, which obviously has a lot to do with you training alongside one another and the other coaches we have at the gym. And I think, like, I must be doing something right. You know what I mean? I must be doing something right.
I can say that firsthand. You know, the impact you've had. You know, everything to you. You know, obviously, you know, Jimmy's my coach too, and all the other teammates at the gym, all the other coaches. But like, you're my head coach, and I'd be nowhere without you. Not that, you know, I'm ADCC champion, you know, right now, but yeah.
Yeah, but like, you've done very well in what
you've taught me everything that I know. You're a fantastic coach. I can say that firsthand.
But a lot of that as well is you need people like you around guys like me. If I want to be a coach, answering your next part of the question, to be a good coach, you need a team of dedicated athletes who want to learn, who want to be there. If someone don't want to be there, it don't matter what you show them. You could be Hodger Gracie, you could be John Jones. If they don't want to know and they're just there because all they want to do is just roll at the end, or they want to post a picture up on Instagram with a caption that sounds more inspiring than it actually is, like, they're not there for the right reasons. You guys, you turn up, you listen, you give me undivided attention, and then you all blossom together because you bounce off one another. If you don't give me the time and the effort, I can't give you what it is you need to learn. You know what I mean? And I learn as much from you guys as I do from guys like Kevin and Jimmy, from seeing what happens in competition. Right, we need to work on that area, we need to work on that area. And then stuff that you guys go and learn and come back and show, especially like guys like Riley. Like, I learned tons from Riley. Like, Riley showed me tons of stuff. Max as well. Like, the guys who are now coaching alongside me, Sam. Kieran, he's not with us anymore, but he had a big part to play in that. I learned from them sorts of guys all the time. And then when I go over and I train with Kev, like Shady might show me a little bit something. It's not been for a while, unfortunately, because I've got caught up with things here. But definitely, I need to start going back over there because it all helps. It all helps. You can't neglect your own training when you become a coach. That's why I've been through periods as a coach where I've totally focused on my coaching and I've put a bit of weight on and stuff like this. And as much as I think that's an integral part of coaching, learning to be a coach and forgetting your own wants and desires and wanting to be the best on the mat. Because if I've never won out significant, how can I expect to still be the best on the mat but then want you guys to? You know what I mean? There's going to be a point where you surpass me. Max already nearly asked. You know what I mean? There's guys who are coached that now can give me an hard time. Yeah, they can give me a really hard time. But a lot more, definitely since getting this job full time, I think to kind of like dim the imposter syndrome and convince myself, I'm forcing myself to actively roll a lot more. Like I try and roll every Wednesday. I'm a Wednesday night class, especially just recently. I try and roll on that. I train every morning. I don't want to jump in and train there. I don't train every morning. That's a lie. I don't jump in on the MMA sparring. Like I have done in the past, but man, I ain't getting no younger, getting lumps punched out of me. It ain't what I want to be doing. But I'll jump in on the ground and pound. I'll jump in on the wall work. I'll jump in on the grappling. I'll do as much as I can in that respect. And I'll still try and learn as much as I can in terms of the striking and everything else. I'll jump in on a public class and spar kickboxing. I'll be amongst it as much as I can to try and learn as much as I can, because I'm probably never going to have an MMA fight. Maybe one day I might do it as a bucket list thing. I don't know, maybe. But hopefully I'd like to think that I might compete in jiu-jitsu again to some degree, like maybe have a match on into grapple or something at some point. Like I'm getting to the point of my rolling now where I feel like I could do something like that. But when you're totally committed to just coaching and then you jump on the mat and think that you're going to be able to do what you could do 6 months ago when you were rolling all the time, you'll get a shock.
Sorry, I just had a random spontaneous coughing fit.
You'll get a shock. Do you know what I mean? Like fighting has to be totally selfish, and coaching to some degree has to be totally selfless. Like you have to put others before yourself.
Not diametrically opposite, but
they do travel parallel to some degree, but then they branch off. The more seriously you take one route over the other, they kind of branch off. Yeah, they kind of branch off. Kev still competes from time to time, and he's a phenomenal coach. But I felt like I've needed periods where I've needed to totally invest myself into you guys and do nothing but coach. And then now I feel like it's beneficial to both you lot and myself to be rolling a little bit more, getting amongst it, seeing what works, testing out the techniques that I'm teaching you, getting some mileage out of them myself before I'm actually trying to show you and preach it. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, yeah.
No. I think it definitely goes without saying that coaching, being a coach and being a competitor are two very different things. Just because you're a really good competitor, it doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. And just because you're a good coach doesn't mean you're the best competitor. And I really wouldn't, sell yourself short on being a competitor. Like, bro, anyone at the gym is going to, would happily write a testimonial as to, how good you are on the mat and how much of a tough role you are.
I mean, all I want to be known as, Aaron, like I ain't got like no hunger to be the best, like, which is what you need to be the best. Like, all I want to be known as is like, oh, that Joe, he's all right, isn't he? He can hang. You know what I mean? As long as people say that about me, I'm happy, to be honest. Like, but yeah, I obviously know that I'm not shit, but to be in the position I am, I definitely shouldn't be. You know what I mean?
I disagree. But
like,
that's your perspective. That's your perspective. My point was, sorry to interrupt. My point was, like, don't sell yourself short as a competitor, but that ties in nicely. You saying you shouldn't be in the position you're in. That was my point. That being a competitor and being a coach are two different things. Okay, like, take how good you are as a competitor. We can debate that. Another time. But talking about you being a coach, like, you're a really good coach. And like I said, I've trained other places as well. Obviously, I go up to Knots. When I was down in London, working down there for 5-6 months, I trained at London Grapple, and obviously that's an amazing gym. But I'll happily go on record and say no one is and maybe it's just and
that's because of the chemistry we have as well.
Maybe, but I don't just think it's that, because other people have said it as well. Nobody is able to break down individual components of a technique like you are, and the way you're able to teach people fundamentals and take people through things in a very detailed way. A lot of other coaches that I've gone to and done classes with, they're obviously, they might be very good competitors and they're very good coaches. They can teach you good principles, but they don't have that attention to detail that you do. That's my,
I feel like I've been lucky because a lot of what I do and what I say is regurgitated from Kev and his style of teaching. I think I've been influenced a lot by him.
No, but that's where it comes
and
from.
Then I've been influenced.
You've took that beautifully. You've took that incredibly well.
I've been influenced a lot by Jimmy as well. They're my two mentors in this game, Jimmy and Kev, essentially. There are other people as well who've helped me out along the way, but the two main ones would definitely be them. And I'm lucky that they've both been in immense competitors as well. Like Kev, as a blue belt, I don't think he ever lost, and up until black belt, and still even now, he's always competed. And like Kev has suffered with nerves and anxiety and stuff like that. Maybe just like Jimmy hasn't been able to show the full version of himself that we all know and see in the gym, but he's always put himself out there, and he's had a solid competitive run. Definitely nothing to hang his head about. Same with Jimmy, like a legend, you know what I mean? But they are also able to communicate those skills through coaching. I think they're both very good coaches, and through being with them so much, I believe I've picked up and adopted their techniques and maybe added my own sprinkle, but they're definitely my biggest influence. And I agree, yeah, you can have amazing competitors who can't coach, and you can also have guys who don't really achieve that much becoming great coaches because they see the potential in people, whereas an amazing competitor is very self-centered. Like they just want to train and they can't really be asked to teach. They're not really interested in it. Like I think the passion that you have towards something, like I've just said, I ain't got a massive ego. Like it's not me like trying to make myself sound better than anyone else. It's just how I am. It's how I was brought up by my mum and dad. Don't think you're better than anyone else. You know what I mean? Be humble. Like I think that fits in well to coaching. Like, but then it's not going to serve me well in competition because I'm always second guessing myself. I'm always thinking, should I be here? Do you know what I mean? I'm always having that imposter syndrome. So your mindset has a lot to do with that as well. Yeah.
Different kind of questions now to finish. Obviously, we bonded through jiu-jitsu. But me and you are very close friends. And another another thing that we're partial to that we share is psychedelics. You talk about jiu-jitsu being a positive impact on your life. We've both had numerous psychedelic experiences, and we've both talked about the positive impact they have had on our lives as well. Just talk to me a bit about psychedelics and what you feel they've done for you, and if they've in any way benefited your career as a coach on the mats.
I wouldn't say they've like.
Don't make a link. Don't make a link with that if it's not
there. I've done a lot of drugs, Aaron. I've done a lot of drugs. It's not something I'm particularly proud of, but at the end of the day, it's not something I'm not ashamed of it. Yeah, and I don't consider psychedelics to be the same as stuff like cocaine, ecstasy. It's a different thing. Like cocaine, ecstasy, it's a manufactured high. I feel like you're selling yourself. Like you're buying the cheap alternative to having a good workout. After you've had a good roll and you've rolled for an hour straight, you'll get off that mat feeling a similar sort of high to taking a pill or sniffing a line. And you'll like those endorphins will give you that. The only difference is that's clean, that's natural. You don't have a come down from it. You'll progressively.
You've put in effort to
get do you know what I mean? Whereas the line or the pill is the cheat code, but at the end of that, like you pay for it because you have the come down, you have like what comes after it, like the horrors. Like it's not nice, especially when you get older and you get more of a conscience and you start to feel guilty and shame for what you've done. Like you feel like a shithouse when you do those sorts of things. But when I've had experiences on mushrooms and DMT, they're the main psychedelics I've used. I've not used acid or LSD just yet. I feel like you come out of those sorts of experiences feeling better. Like I think it gives you what you need rather than what you want. Like not every mushroom experience has it necessarily been enjoyable all the way through. Like there's been some pretty, like I wouldn't say traumatic, but there's been some pretty booky ones, like where there's been some ups and downs and some turbulence. But like there's also been some pretty amazing ones which I've had with some really close friends where I feel like it's connected us on another level. Like it sounds absolutely ridiculous and daft, but one of the first times I ever did mushrooms, the first time I ever did mushrooms was in Thailand with my friend Ryan, who I went traveling around South America with. We had them in these shakes, and we went to like just this beach party, and it was just, it was more like
recreational.
Recreational, funny kind of thing. It didn't last that long either. I'm not sure what it was. It was definitely psychedelic to some degree, because we got the visuals, we got the giggles, that kind of thing. But compared to that day I took mushrooms and went on that trek with my mates, like the first time I did a proper full 5, I think it was like 5 or maybe even 6 gram, and we went on like a big trek, like that was like euphoric, do you know what I mean? Like, but there was periods where I was like, had tears streaming down my face, and I couldn't tell you why. It sounds like I sound, and I looked at the time like a lunatic, but in that moment, like we were all so like close and connected. Like I could see my friends in a different light. They almost looked like aliens, and like 2 of them who have like grown up together, like they looked the same on my trip, and it was like they were from the same planet. Whereas my other mate looked a bit more like he was from my planet. That sounds like I'm talking absolute nonsense.
But it only sounds ridiculous to people who haven't had a psychedelic experience, because anyone who has had a psychedelic experience will, even if they haven't had something exactly like that, they'll have experienced something similar.
Yeah.
It won't sound ridiculous to them.
And it's like, mushrooms obviously is a much longer trip. Like I've done that where like the times where I've done it and I've been there with you and we've watched the fights and stuff, like those sorts of trips, like the last one got a little bit out of hand because there was probably too many people around, and I ended up sort of going in my shell and feeling a bit weird, but I come out the other side of it, it was all good. The first time was absolutely brilliant. Like when Sean O'Malley fought Peter Yan, like that was sort of like the pinnacle of the trip. That was the peak of the trip, and that fight was unreal. That was the best fight. That was a great fight. The best of time, like the worst.
That was a great fight sober.
Yeah, that was a great fight sober. Let alone being on 3 gram of mushrooms, watching that jumping out the telly. It was fantastic. Being around all your brothers, all your bros, all there laughing and joking, feeling totally at ease with one another. Yeah, that's what you need to be. You need no responsibilities. Just to be totally relaxed.
You need to be around people you trust.
In your own environment, people who understand what you're doing as well, not people like who are going to be like, oh, what you feel like, or do you know what I mean? Like kind of like
judging you.
Or like not understanding like what you're going through. So they're constantly just trying to talk to you and like not leave you to like, you guys know, like if I do that, like I need like maybe an hour where I'm just sat there looking like Darth Sidious with my hood up, staring at the telly in a vortex like that. But again, that sounds mental. People would think like, well, how is that enjoyable? But it's almost like it's cleaning out your mind. It's like a reset for your mind, I believe. Like you go through like almost like internal trauma in some degree. I don't know how to quite to verbalize it and explain it as well as I'd like to.
I think you said it brilliantly by it doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need.
Yeah, you might be dealing with something in your head, and whether or not you want to admit it, that's going to come to the surface of your mind, and you're going to be forced to reflect on that when you're on a mushroom trip. DMT, I feel, is a much heavier, harder hit, where it's like, again, a reset. Like the best experience I've ever had on DMT was when I went like, as you know, I smoke a bit of weed. Yeah, I like smoking weed, but I went through a period where I cut out weed altogether, had about 6-7 weeks off the spliffs. I hadn't touched a drink. Not that I'm a big drinker or anything, but I like a beer or 2 at the weekend, chilling at home or whatever. But I'd gone teetotal for 6-7 weeks, and I had the DMT pen when I was at home at my mum's in bed, had a couple of chongs on it, put some music on, and I went into another dimension. And I think that that's because my mind was so clear. I wasn't stoned. I wasn't like already compromised, and like the stuff I felt on that trip and how I came out the other side of it and how like much more refreshed and unwound and just better I felt. Like I've always been trying to chase that high since a little bit when I've used DMT or like mushrooms. It's a different kind of voyage you go on. It's much longer, like much more drawn out, isn't it? Like it comes in like waves as well, whereas the DMT is one ferocious, intense hit for like 5 minutes.
DMT is like a 100-meter sprint, and then a psilocybin journey can feel like an ultra marathon.
Yeah.
If it's if it's a heavy one, if it's a long one.
But I think ultimately the results are the same, and you've come out the end of it when you're finally sober. and you feel better for it. You feel better for it now. Do I think that people should be doing it every weekend and abusing it? Absolutely not. Like, it is not a toy. Just like it's not cocaine or ecstasy or even weed. Like, people go out and sniff a bag every weekend. They shouldn't. Like, it's definitely bad for them, but they can do, and they function well enough on that. Or they at least try to. Yeah. They can fake. They can fake it. You know what I mean? Like, they might feel like,
some people's ability to.
They might feel like shit.
Drug addicts or alcoholics and still get through life.
Yeah, functioning alcoholics
is pretty amazing.
Functioning alcoholics and drug addicts, they live among us. Like, you'd walk past a dozen.
There's more than you realise.
Yeah, you'd walk past a dozen in the street every day. But like, as much as I don't believe you can abuse those drugs, you can get away with it a lot more with psilocybin and DMT and stuff like that. I think. Like, a quarterly thing is more than enough. Yeah. Like, even like every
unless
6
you go
months.
into, some people talk about microdosing, unless you know.
I've never microdosed. I've only ever done it as like an event. You know what I mean? Like, listen, I'm doing this today. You can't do that. You'd
be paralysed by your own internalisation.
Yeah.
Because you can't do anything out. You know what I mean? People, they smoke a bit of weed, or even, I don't know, do a couple of lines, they can do other things. Try smoking DMT or taking a heavy dose of mushrooms and then going about your normal day. It's not going to happen.
You definitely couldn't do it on the DMT. On a small dose of mushrooms, you maybe could, but then you're not going to get the effects of what you'd get on a proper dose with the mushrooms. But with the mushrooms, like DMT, you can hit that pen. I've never smoked like the raw crystal. I've only ever done it through the vaporized pen form. But you can smoke that pen. And no matter how intense the trip, in 10 minutes it's going to be over, you're going to be back to normal. Mushrooms, you better buckle up, because if you're doing 3 to 5 gram for the next 6 hours or 4 to 6 hours, 4.5, 6 hours, like, you better just accept what's happening is going to happen. And it's going to come in waves, and you're going to feel all right 1 minute, the next minute you're going to feel like an emotional wreck. And to speak about it, people probably think like, well, why the hell does he want to do that? But you're going to have to, like, I'm not encouraging drug use or anything like that, but you'd have to do it to understand, like, what you get out of it and how you feel afterwards. There's enough famous...
It's a net benefit.
Yeah.
It's a net benefit at the end of the day. You feel better for it.
Yes, whereas there's never a time where I've gone out and used party drugs and not regretted doing it. You know what I mean? I don't think I might have regretted doing mushrooms once, but that was more the situation than the actual effects. Like, I definitely still felt better afterwards, but I thought, I didn't like people seeing me like that. Do you know what I mean? Using party drugs, like, you're gonna feel like shit after that, regardless. I think you have to put yourself through it to understand that what you're gonna get out of it. Yeah, and maybe not everyone feels the same as us. Maybe because I know a few of my mates who they like smoking weed and stuff, but mushrooms, they're like that, no chance. Like, because they've had a bad go on it, and they'll never touch it again. I think because my first few trips were so enjoyable, even though now I might have had 1 or 2 dodgy ones, I still have the faith that this is, like, as long as I'm not doing it every weekend, as long as it's like a once in a blue moon thing, it's always going to be something that I can enjoy and take something from.
This may be a related question or may not. I've never actually asked you this before, never spoken about this before, I don't think. Do you think there's life after death?
I definitely think that DMT is maybe, like, I think it is what your brain releases when you die or something like that. I've heard that or whatever.
Yeah. You get a big release DMT.
But like the feeling that it gives you, I think might be the feeling that you get when you're about to die. And like I remember that time what I spoke about earlier when I was like teetotal, totally sober, and I smoked the DMT pen. I felt like so relaxed and comfortable, like it was almost like, take me. You know what I mean? I almost felt like there were certain entities, whether you call that God or whatever, that were like closing in around me. But like, I felt safe, I felt comfortable, I felt like they were there as a positive thing. Like, I can't describe what I was seeing or whatever, but in that moment, I felt like an external force or being, which some people might think is God. And I definitely didn't feel like in danger or anything like that. I felt comforted by it. And when I come out the other side of it, I was still fully aware throughout the whole thing, this is a trip. But like, it was, when I come out the other side of it, it was like a very like rewarding, euphoric kind of like experience. Life after death, I don't know. I think you go in the ground and who knows. Yeah, my dad always says it's like you go to sleep and you don't wake up. That's what my dad always says. He's an atheist, like, but trust me, bro. Like when there's been bad times in my life, I've prayed. I have prayed. Like when my sister's been poorly, I remember. He don't know this, but before Jimmy fought Figlak, I got down on my knees in the hotel toilet and I prayed. I prayed for him to win. Because like when you feel so powerless in something, you want to feel like you're doing something. And I'd spent all weekend trying to talk him up and everything else. I knew he was nervous. I knew he had shit going on in his life. And I prayed in the hotel toilet, like, please give him this, give him this. And I've not done it again since, and I wouldn't do it before, like, because I don't want it to be a selfish thing. Like, if there is a God, I don't think I'm entitled to anything. You know what I mean? But like when you feel powerless and you just want to feel like you're doing something,
You search for power.
yeah, you like, if there's something out there, like just roll the dice in my favour this time. You know what I mean? Or for the favour of someone I love and I care about, like Jimmy. Do you know what I mean? After everything I'd seen him go through that camp, I wanted him to win so much. And you obviously see on that video, I totally lost my mind when he knocked Figlak out.
Such a pure celebration, and release of emotion from both Jimmy in the octagon and then you in the cage. And you,
I've probably prayed a handful of times in my life since I was like a teenager, and like probably a couple of those times would have been for my sister, or other family members who were in trouble. Like I've never might have prayed once or twice for myself, like when I've been struggling or whatever, maybe with my back, I'm not sure. I say pray, it's a lot of, like, those sorts of times I'm kind of like begging to anyone who's listening. Do you know what I mean? But I definitely pray to a God if he's out there for Jimmy, and at least one time with my sister. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Another deep philosophical question. What's something about your 20s, looking back now, because you're 34?
I'm 35 next year, 34,
year. Just looking back on your 20s, you've given me, you're like a big brother to me. You've given me so much guidance on, how to best use these years of my life. What's something you would do differently in your 20s, if anything? Or not if you would go back and do it differently, what would you advise people in their 20s to do?
Don't take your life too seriously. Your 20s are there to be discovering yourself, finding out who you are, what you like. Don't try and make anyone else happy, whether it's an employer, whether it's a bird. Like, as much as it's good to be cordial and be nice to people, like I've been in relationships I knew I didn't want to be in. I've worked in jobs that I didn't want to work in, but I knew like people were dependent on me, and I knew the girl or whoever like was in love with me or whatever, and I've wasted, like, not wasted is probably the wrong word, but I've spent years in places doing things which could have been avoided if I was a little bit more self-centered. Like now, I don't want to ever be a selfish person. I think that's what makes me an half-decent coach. The fact that I care a lot about people and seeing you do well and having time to listen to you guys and everything else. But I definitely think like I felt like I had to have it all figured out before I did. Like me and Kelsey together when we were living in my mum and dad's in my room, like especially during COVID when I lost my jobs and everything like that, and I was working at Amazon warehouse and then working at some other shit show, which is probably the worst job I've ever had in my life. Like where I am now, doing what I love, having my own house, having my dog, like it seems so far off, and it was only really 2 or 3 years of hard graft. You know what I mean? Like I always had my vision, I always had my focus. I just had to not stray from the path. So whatever was going on around me, I just kept at it, and I never had that focus in my 20s. Like not that I did towards the end of my 20s. Anyway, in fact, maybe when I first started jiu-jitsu, I'd have just like if I'd have maybe like focused on myself a little bit more. Like even though it did a lot for me. Like I was still in relationships, I was still like doing a lot of stuff to please other people, and I think you have to look after number one to some degree, and you only get one shot at this life, so don't waste it worrying or trying to make someone else happy or trying to force something that's not there. It's not worth it, man. It's just not worth it. You've got to live for the moment and live for the now, and try and take advice like what's given to you by people you look up to. My dad gave me tons of advice growing up, and he was right about pretty much everything. You know what I mean? And you don't realise it until you get older. Like I said, like I love Tom Owen. Tom Owen is like one of my little brothers. Like I do, like I care a lot about that lad. But he's going through a period now, or he was going through a period not long ago, where I felt like he had to have it all figured out. Like he wanted a missus, he wanted stability, he wanted a job, he wanted this, he wanted that. And that's all what you're forced to believe you need by society. And that is definitely, like, if you can get that locked down, like my mate Danny Turnbull, like, he's got a beautiful missus, a beautiful family, like, he's got an amazing career, but he is like your typical guy who's just doing well in life, but he's not doing anything extraordinary. He's just great at life. Do you know what I mean? But I felt like Tom was trying to like force that like normal routine when he has such an immense talent. If he'd just focused on that, but it's difficult for him because he's never had the support that I've had in terms of a family and stuff like that. Like, his family was the gym, his family was the team, and that's why when he decided to leave to go back to Newcastle and start doing what he's doing, as much as he's made it a success, he's DJing now, he's got a well-paid job, he's got a great car, he come down to visit the other week, really, really proud of him. But I felt like for a certain point, he was feeling like he had to have it all figured out before he actually did. I didn't have it all figured out. I still don't have it all figured out. I didn't have fuck all figured out until I was probably 30, like 30 plus. Stuff start to come together for me. Before then, I was just kind of winging it and seeing where it goes. Yeah, like I tried a lot of things through the influence of other people because I thought like, oh, they're doing it, or they're benefiting from it, or they're enjoying it. So maybe that's what I should do, rather than just focusing on what made me happy and what I knew deep down I wanted to do and what I was good at, just focusing on that rather than getting pulled from pillar to post, trying to like fit in with different crowds or please different people, or do you know what I mean? Like, it's, yeah, you got to live for yourself. As much as it's good to be open-minded and a people person and show love and show respect to everyone around you, treat people as you find them, you've got to look after number one as well, because no one's got your back like yourself. Do you know what I mean? And I think I've sacrificed a lot of my own happiness at times, or a lot of my own opportunities, trying to keep someone else happy or do something that I feel like would please someone else. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, especially in my 20s, yeah.
And I think this dovetails nicely as a final question off of that. Here today, what does success mean to Joe Taylor?
So success, it's definitely like, I never thought I'd say it. Like, it's not a money thing. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not struggling for money, but by no means am I raking it in. Like, me and Kelsey, we do all right. We've got a little pot of savings. But we're not like being able to splash out on whatever we want, whenever we want. Like, I go without to make sure that she can have what she wants and the house can have what it needs, and she provides as well. Like, absolutely, I'm not saying it's like all done through me, but fulfillment comes in the form of doing what you love. So I'm able to come in and coach JiuJitsu and do what I love now for a living, see you guys succeed, live a little bit through you guys. I'll admit to that. Like, it's great being able to be cage side and see you guys go and win fights and belts and medals at jiu-jitsu comps and do stuff that I was never able to do and share it with you. And I'm so grateful that you guys like are grateful to me for that and almost like what would be the word, like would say that I'm the reason that you have managed to achieve some of that success or whatever. That's a great feeling for me. But it's like, health comes first. You can have all the money in the world if you ain't healthy, and that could be in the terms of like a serious illness or an injury. When you're injured, like with my back, you can't do what you love. You can't function how you want to when you're compromised. Like, you can have all the money in the world, you have all the money in the bank, and it don't mean a great deal. It's just a number on a screen. Do you know what I mean? Like, money definitely helps, and 100% helps. I'd love more money, but I don't think money's going to ultimately make me feel fulfilled and happy. Doing what I love and benefiting other people and making those I care about like feel good about themselves. That's the main thing for me. Having love from my missus, like being in a content relationship. I've been in relationships before where, like I say, like I could have been with a lovely bird, but I knew like I didn't want to be in a relationship. I've been with birds where I felt like, what they up to? Like, any chance I get, should I be checking their phone, kind of thing. With Kelsey, like they say, like love is like a like when you find love, true love, I think it's like pure bliss, just content. You know what I mean? It's not like a whirlwind of emotions. It's not overly exciting. It's not overly passionate. It's just calmness. Like I feel like I can
lasting joy.
Yeah,
lasting bliss.
I can focus on myself. I can do what it is I need to do to be happy because I've got her support. I've got her blessing, and then I have her to go home to at the end of the day. And she makes me incredibly happy and feel incredibly content. So I'm lucky to have that. I think some people go through life and they never find that. I think some people settle. I think some people force. I think some people, like they never find that. But I'm lucky that in Kelsey, maybe one day I'll turn around and I'll look a mug when she's off dicking the milkman. But I honestly, I could never see it because I don't even have to try to trust her. You know what I mean? And I've been in relationships where I don't trust who I'm with, definitely. But it's a very pure, like easy thing, like being with Kelsey and then having the ability and the blessing of coming in and doing what I love and putting smiles on your faces and having the crack, having the banter, and being able to do like all these amazing things alongside my brothers, my friends. That's true fulfillment. That's success. Like being alongside Jimmy, like I used to watch Jimmy fighting on the TV. Do you know what I mean? Like I knew about the rough house and everything else, like coming up through jiu-jitsu, like before I'd ever met Jimmy or had like a relationship with him in terms of a friendship. Like I'd maybe nodded him at a show or something like that, but I'd never like, me and Jimmy now, we're like brothers. Do you know what I mean? Like he can depend on me for anything and I can depend on him. And it's like, I think that relationship benefits the gym as well. Like it's almost like a mum and dad kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like I definitely think he's dad and I'm mum, but yeah, it's that's
hey, dad and dad these days.
Yeah, to stick with the times, but that's a long-winded answer, but that's success. That's fulfillment. Yeah,
I think that's a great definition. You'll never give yourself the credit that you deserve and you're owed. I'm going to say it, not just on behalf of myself, but on behalf of the whole team. You're one of the biggest assets to the gym. The advice that you give all of us, not just in terms of how to be, the best on the mats, in comps, in fights, but in life as well. I appreciate it. I know everyone else appreciates it, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey and the wisdom that you've picked up along the way. So thank you, bro.
I appreciate it, mate, and I think you're doing a good job, man. I think I always want to support people with stuff like this. Like it takes balls to do something like this. It's easy to take the piss and be like, oh, what's he doing? What are you doing? You know what I mean? What are you doing? You know what I mean? You're doing something that you're passionate about. You're not making no money or anything from it yet, but you're putting out something that I believe is good content. I think you're a good guy. You're intelligent, and I hope this whole thing blows up for you. Whether it's financially or whether it's just that you can't wait to do it each podcast each week and it gives you like, you know what I mean, a highlight of each week, like recording this podcast. I hope it's overwhelming success for you, and that's why I come on here. Like I don't necessarily feel overly comfortable or confident doing this kind of thing, but I do it for you because I respect you and I want what you do to be a success, whether it's on or off the mat.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.